Ladies and gentlemen, we are now live.
Thank you, Nate. Good evening, everyone. This is the regular meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees on February 22nd, 2021. The time is 7:02 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
I just got a text message actually from Molly. She just lost internet, so you guys know. Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Waiver?
Here.
Trustee Beerma?
Here.
Trustee George?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Here.
Mayor Furman?
Here. Interim Administrator Edwards, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any staff or board revisions to the agenda tonight, noting that the trustees received a slightly revised agenda on Friday with 2 items under continued business, but I'm not positive about whether or not that was reflected in the public packet.
So we do have an addition to new business. I want to put it up front, or I'd recommend that we put it up front. It's the ski joring. We talked about it last meeting, but we need to approve their permit request.
So noted. And for the public's clarification, just in case the updates that the trustees received on Friday weren't included in the public packet, under continued business, we have 10A attorney search process and 10B administrator search process. Any other staff or trustee revisions to the agenda? Clerk Freeze?
It was brought to my attention Friday afternoon that in Anthony Edwards' contract that it states 2020 and not 2021, that we need to get that fixed also.
Okay, so that's in 4C, and we'll make that note there as well. Thank you, Clerk Freeze. Anything else? All right. At this time, we will go to public comment. Comments must be limited to 3 minutes in duration. And you can comment if you're on Zoom by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and we will promote you to a panelist. Nathan, I'm not currently a co-host in the meeting, so I can't promote those raising their hands. I see one member of the public who wishes to speak. If you could promote them, that would be great. This evening we have joining us Melody Skinner. Melody, once you unmute, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'd like to talk about the quality of life survey that you're going to talk about later. I read all the comments today, and the best comment in August was get vaccine. So we've had a lot of similar surveys and group meetings over the years with some of the same types of answers. I think COVID probably made the answers to this survey more negative than usual. A lot of comments are beyond what government and business can supply. I think it would be a good idea to wait and see what happens with community builders. Hopefully people are not as negative. And if you are having a public meeting, I would like to know about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Melody. I do not see any other raised hands. So we're now going to close the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting. Moving on to presentations and proclamations, of which I'm not aware of any on this agenda. So we move to new business, which is 4A, extended premises. I'm sorry, we moved ahead ski joring. So I defer now to Interim Administrator Edwards to brief us on ski joring.
Sure,
I'm sorry, really quickly, can I ask something since my internet keeps cutting out? How did this happen? I did not hear the beginning of the meeting. Can you keep me up to date, please?
Interim Administrator Edwards, would you like to respond to Trustee Barella?
Trustee Barella, we had the pledge. There was a comment by Ms. Skinner, Ms. Skinner on the quality of life survey, and we made two changes on the agenda. One was to the contract for interim administrator, that the date should be changed to 2021 rather than 2020. And then the other was related to ski joring, that we need to go ahead. At the last meeting, we talked about allowing the film and those activities to go ahead, but we didn't approve the permit to do so. So that was put on the agenda at the front of the agenda.
Okay, does anybody have the permit? I have yet to see it. Did anybody receive it?
I believe that app was sent out after the agenda went out. Would you like me to find it and send it to you, Trustee Barella, and the rest of trustees?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'm going to leave my video off because I stream better that way with just audio. Hopefully I won't lose the meeting again. Thank you.
I would suggest that we just go on the agenda until that's out to everybody. Mayor Furman.
All right, thank you. So moving on to extended premises ordinance discussion, presentation, and discussion of parklet strategy.
I think that Todd Bove will be presenting that for us at this time. Todd?
Director Bove just texted me and said he's having issues with Zoom.
Okay. Sounds. Todd, can you, you're on mute. Can you unmute?
Looks like he left and is going to be rejoining.
Okay. So let's go to the budget versus actual January and sales tax collection update. Kelly, do you want to engage in that discussion?
I'll try and do the best that I can with not knowing that I was going to do this. So this was last minute.
Is John available there?
He went back home. He was told that he wasn't needed tonight, so I can call him if I have to.
Oh, I thought he was going to stay when I talked to him earlier. Okay.
I can tell you sales tax through February is 23,858, and we're up 14.9%.
Todd, are you ready to present?
I am, yes. My apologies. I got kicked out of Zoom right when I was trying to join the conversation. So thank you all for waiting. What we're discussing tonight is outdoor dining guidance and consideration. I'm sure most of the trustees remember last year, the board adopted ordinance 2020-04. It allowed for the administrative modification of liquor license premises and issued right-of-way use licenses to local businesses to operate in the public right-of-way. What we're trying to do here is provide the board with as much information as possible, see if we can get a consensus from the board if they would like to continue that program. What I've generally heard from the community was that the program was very successful. Business owners seem pleased with it as well. So I think staff is just looking for some direction as far as how we would like to proceed with that program. If we'd like to expand it, keep it how it was. If you look through your packets, there was some information in there and some proposals for various options of ways to proceed. I would be happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability, but I think the intention here was really to see if we could get a consensus that we would like to continue the program, and if so, how we'd like to proceed with it.
Thank you, Director Bove. Trustees, what are your thoughts? Trustee Bierma?
From my understanding, it seemed like it went really well this summer, and it seems like we're going to have similar restrictions, maybe slightly less restrictive summer. So I feel like at least continuing it for another summer and fall seems like a really great idea.
Thank you, Trustee Bierma. Trustee Barella?
Yeah, so I'm really happy to see that the 50,000 that we can apply for from CDOT is in here. This is something that I talked about before about the matching grants that we could apply for, because it was for, I don't know, the purchasing and offsetting of the expenses of these parklets. So this is exactly who I contacted. I was going to spend the money personally as a business to purchase one of these if I knew that the program was going to continue in perpetuity. I will not invest that personally, obviously, if it's not going to. So I'm glad that this was put back into context using the CDOT grant money. And I like the model that was written down below. You guys did a lot of work on that. Thank you. The estimated cost that I was estimated at was $10,000, and then annual business fee. And so we could choose as business owners. I think this is very comprehensive. I'm glad to see it. Is it going to go on in perpetuity? Is it only going to be for COVID? But that's the couple of items that are truly probably the most forefront of this. If it's only going to be this year and next year, why would we spend the money to invest in it as a town, even if we could keep them, store them, and so on, and utilize them year after year? If we're going to put this in perpetuity like other communities have, then I can see the absolute necessity to want to use that grant money. Thank you, Todd, for doing all this work on that. That's my thoughts. I love them. I absolutely love them.
Thank you, Trustee Barella. So I guess Trustee Barella raises a good question. It seems like an important decision for the board to consider in relation to whether or not the town invests in, and by way of doing so asks businesses to invest in these parklets, the duration in which we're supporting the idea of these bump outs. Is this something we'd like to consider into perpetuity, whether or not COVID restrictions continue to exist? Or is it something that we're only considering in connection with COVID restrictions? Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
I agree that they were really effective for our community, and it seems like, you know, there's no reason to stop encouraging the use of the bump outs regardless of COVID, just because it really was a nice atmosphere. My only question, and I can see supporting, you know, increasing the town infrastructure around bump outs, like what we saw in the picture in Grand Junction or something like that, and working towards some of these grants. My only question is just how does that fit with sort of other beautification projects that might be going on in Silverton? And, you know, how does that work itself out through, I don't know if there's like a master planning vision for the downtown area, or just how to fit that in with other projects that may be happening.
Thank you. Trustee Birma?
I guess this is a question for Todd. I don't know if you've actually seen the parklets or not, but do you see them, especially if the town purchases them, being used pretty versatile? So like, could we use them potentially in the winter for like ski joring, or over at Kendall as an additional area of covered? You know, could it be a multi thing that we could use year round?
Sure. So I would encourage all the trustees, if they haven't yet, to visit that website, coloradoparklets.com. The units themselves are modular, so they break down into 4 foot by 4 foot 4 panels, 4 foot by 4 foot wall panels. Essentially, you can throw one of them up or take one down. It's my understanding in about an hour. So we certainly, and storage will be an issue with these. If the town does decide that the town is solely going to take responsibility for setting them up, maintaining them, breaking them down, storing them in the winter, that's definitely something to consider, because we don't have a whole lot of storage space. But I don't see any reason we couldn't relocate them somewhere like Kendall and put them up if we had a good use for them. And they are weather resistant and powder coated. They shouldn't rust. They should be pretty durable. I would like to specifically ask the company if they've experienced anything with prolonged outdoor use before I fully committed to saying we could. But in theory, I think that could absolutely work.
Director Bove, is there any possibility of having some type of like supplemental power that has a heat source from above? I've seen them in other examples of parklets, but not in the images here. And I know that the power source can be troubling, whether it's propane or electric, but that seems like in a place like Silverton, it would significantly expand the usability of these if they also had heating.
Yeah, I spoke briefly with Bill McDougall regarding that, because we did have some questions about power, lights, propane heaters, things like that. Without speaking for Bill or double checking with him, it was my understanding that it would be absolutely allowed to put a propane heater, similar like what you'd see on a patio or somewhere inside of these units, or mounted from the roof of the structure.
Thank you. Trustee Brella?
So it's a slightly different take, but if we enclose these units, right, just say the model that you have in the picture, then the extended premise license, we have to, oh my goodness, well, this might be a better question for the health department, because I do believe once you put up like the actual fence around it and everything, you're not allowed to have, I don't think you're allowed to have animals then inside it, where a lot of us, myself included, had a lot of issues with that this summer, where we had people that only wanted to be outside with dogs. So because it's an extension of your doorway, we're saying it's an extension of our liquor license, but we're also serving food there. So that would be my one question if we went with something, the town decided to go with these and they went with something with those really tight enclosed panels versus having the more open panels. Because the model that they showed me had, I want to say it had these wires that were twisted through, that ran all the way around that created the tension on it. And it was 1, 2, 3, I think it was 3 rows. So just something to think about, just because we do have to worry about that. We don't want to violate anything with the health department in sort of regulations, even though we said it's extended premise for liquor license. Anybody using it to serve food out there, we run into a little bit of a double-edged sword. So we just need to make sure we have all the regulations clear. That's all I can think of right now. I think these units are amazing. Like I said, I almost bought one for myself, but I'm for it. I don't know about the rest of you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Well, and this may go without saying, but maybe just the logistical factor of placing them where it's fair to all the businesses. I know we sort of had this discussion with like how many parking spaces and, you know, how much space in front of your business, and maybe Trustee Barella's question with the health department is similar, but yeah, I'm sure that you probably already have that on your radar, Todd, but just thinking about the location so that it doesn't not favor one establishment over another.
I think the intention here would be that each restaurant or business interested in participating in the program would have their own in front of their own frontage. So these wouldn't be distributed as community spaces. These would be designated only to the businesses that wanted to participate. And the discussion also came up of potentially, if we do decide to go the route of applying for a grant, potentially ordering more than we need. Right now, last year we had 8 participants in the outdoor dining program. We can assume that number will grow, and then we don't want to be in a position where we don't have enough to accommodate new businesses that would like them. So potentially, if we have 8 participating businesses, maybe we should consider getting 10 or 11 so that we can accommodate a little bit of growth.
Trustee Harper?
Thank you. Mr. Bove, have the 8 participating businesses from last year already signed up for this year?
They have not, no, but we haven't really offered this program yet. I think we were trying to get a consensus from the board of what the program was going to look like, or if we were going to implement any fees, or if we were going to use town barricades. There's quite a few moving parts in this, or different paths we could choose to take. So I think that's kind of what we were looking to get from the board tonight before we went to the actual business owners. But it's my understanding anecdotally that quite a few businesses remain interested in this program.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Barella?
Yeah, Sally, if you look down below, the town of Silverton fee consideration for informational purposes only. Initial cost varies by model. Annual fee per business. Time generated. So if you look at that chart, that actually shows you how the cost would be spread over the time frame, and the businesses who were interested in them would basically rent them. Just say use the $10,000 model. If I, as my business, wanted to run it, it's $2,500 for, I'm assuming, the parameters that we set forth, saying it's May 1st to October 31st or something, that they would be available and on the street, as yet to be determined. And then that's what I would pay for the rental. So that's how the town of Silverton would recoup the, I'm assuming you're talking about recouping the extra money that it would cost for the grant, for the match, for the 10% match. Is that right, Todd?
That's correct. I think there's, reading through the options, there's quite a few ways you could go about this. The town could attempt to purchase these units and provide them to businesses essentially on a payback program until the units were paid for. The town could also look at this as a potential revenue source moving forward, where it's $2,500 a year in perpetuity, and it's generating revenue for the town, which is something that can be helpful with other projects such as streets, wayfinding, stuff like that. So there's really a pretty wide array of options here. But I think the one thing we do know is that we'd like to support the businesses and it seemed like these were helpful in the past. So it's a question really for the board of if they see this as an investment they'd like a return on, or if it's something we would simply like to provide to help our businesses that have struggled.
And I like the idea of constantly renting them to the businesses because it does provide a different stream of revenue to start on some of those wayfindings. I love that idea. I thought this was a very well thought out plan. Thank you.
Trustee George, I saw your hand up earlier.
No, Trustee Barella. She had the same question I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Harper?
Thank you. Last summer, each business was allotted 3 parking spaces to turn them into additional dining. These units here, are they roughly the same size as 3 parking spaces, or are they larger, smaller? Are they going to take up more of our parking on green or less?
So these units are custom built. They can be fabricated to our specifications as we give the company. These estimates that you're seeing, the $10,000 figure, was for I believe it was 20 by 14. It would fit approximately 5 tables based on Bill McDougall and I's calculations. They can be built to accommodate standard parking or diagonal parking. And I believe the way we operated it last year was that you were given 2 spaces or 3 spaces, depending on the amount of frontage your business actually had. Mm-hmm. So someone who has a double lot, in theory, could use 3 spaces. And someone who has a smaller frontage might be limited to 2, but we didn't want businesses encroaching on other storefronts. So they may be different sizes for different businesses, depending on what those, how this program works out. The other thing I would note is that these are impact resistant. So being that they are in a right of way on a busy street, it would be pretty rare for someone to just kind of smack into one of these with a truck, but it certainly could happen. And these do provide a bit of a safety consideration over, say cones and chains and regular barricades like we were using in the past.
Perfect. A follow-up question. Thank you for that, by the way. Follow-up question for the businesses. These would be located directly in front of businesses. Could businesses run an extension cord to these, illuminating these units at night?
It is my understanding that a extension cord could not impede egress or cross the public right of way, being the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. That's a question more for Bill McDougall or Lisa Adair, but my gut is telling me you could not at least put one on the ground on the sidewalk with like a rubber mat over it or something. That wouldn't be acceptable.
Looking at the height, how tall are these?
I don't have an exact measurement, but I would approximate maybe 8 or 9 feet.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. One thing we could consider is if you were looking to do something like outdoor lights on that kind of decorative lighting like we have in Columbine Park. I've had great success using solar units. They just have a little tiny solar panel that's about 6 inches by 6 inches. And I have them in my backyard, and they're enough to keep the lights on all night long, if you so desired.
Perfect.
Trustee Wiegert, any comments or questions?
I think this has we've had a great discussion and brought up a lot of good ideas. I'm totally in favor of the ordinance as we had it structured last year. I thought that did a lot of good and really helped the businesses out. As far as extending it in perpetuity, I would also be in favor of that. I think it could add some interest to the downtown landscape. Looking at the parklets as they're kind of built, they do seem rather modern. There's a part of me that really wonders how that's going to fit with our Victorian heritage. I think they could take on a bit of a mining look if they were allowed to rust and use some kind of barnwood treatment on the wood as an option per se. But I think they do serve their place, and a lot of good reasons. Impact resistance, like you stated there, Mr. Bove, and I also really like your idea with the solar panels. I think that's a great way to provide lighting and pretty low cost without running a bunch of extra cords out there. I think that's fantastic. So yeah, I'd like to see where this goes, but I'd be in favor of the ordinance as we had it structured last year at the very minimum.
I think the direction we'd be looking here for this evening is number one, kind of a consensus from the board that we would like to continue the program. And then secondly, even a consensus would be fine as far as, if we're going to apply for a grant, that'll take some time to get that grant together and get it out and receive a response. We're just going to simply order more barricades like we used for the program last year, kind of like similar to what we use for events. There's a small lead time on that as well because they come from freight. If we were going to have these actual parklets fabricated, we're probably looking somewhere closer to 6 to 8 weeks. So I think that's why we wanted to begin the conversation now, is so we can be prepared for the spring and prepared to support the businesses, come possibly as early as May. The other thing I would add is I kind of just got this information towards the end of the day today, but there's also the same company does barricades, and they're fabricated to kind of look in a similar manner to the parklets, but they don't have a floor and a roof. And I believe they run about $200 per linear foot. And they said they could get that price down significantly, but that might also be a lower cost alternative, just using more of a decorative barricade as opposed to like an event barricade. And we might be able to do something like that as well.
Thank you. I'm generally in favor of the bump outs into perpetuity. I thought that the outdoor dining edition for Silverton was really fantastic, socially and as a welcoming feel to the downtown district. I think we have a handful of questions to answer still before the board, it sounds like, could make a strong decision. But so far, I'm hearing mostly people leaning in favor of these for the foreseeable future, if not perpetuity. The questions that I noted were, how does this impact our overall plan with respect to parking? How does the town propose to manage storage of these, unless we do end up using them year round in some capacity? And then how do these factor into an overall beautification idea or pedestrian development for the downtown district? And then I'd add one more, which is, it seemed like the bump outs were much more successful on Green than Blair because of dust. And I'm wondering to what extent these can mitigate the dust issue and become a feasible option for the businesses on Blair as well. And also how that interacts with the development plans that we saw last year for Blair Street, and making sure that all these things play nicely together. But in general, I'm very supportive of the bump outs, of creating nicer infrastructure and safer infrastructure for outdoor dining. Trustee Brella?
That was going to be another issue that I was going to bring up, was Blair Street. Having these directly in front, are they raised enough, Todd? Was the platform big enough that it could actually and be leveled nicely on the dirt street versus the paved street? And would that help mitigate any sort of flow of water or anything that flows downhill? Would it flow under? I never did actually look when I was getting it priced out for myself, how the base was made. Can you answer that for me?
Sure. So there's a great video on the website that shows how these are constructed and put together. It's my understanding, similar to a restaurant table, that you can self-level them. There's brackets on each corner, so they would be slightly lifted off the ground. That's a concern with regular barricades. So if we just have regular barricades, even on Green Street, everyone's seen the way the water runs down the gutters. And when you're on street level with a bump out, that water runs right through your dining area essentially. So if we were to go for the full blown parklet with the floor and the roof and that style of model, in theory, the water would run right underneath them, and they can be self-leveled using the adjusting feet on the corners. Additionally, regarding the concern with dust, there is an option also for their fabric, like zip-in windows. They're breathable, they still let air through, but they might mitigate some of the dust. So we could always consider on Blair Street, maybe paying a little extra attention to the units that were selected, because there is an option there they're like the sunshades almost. So in where the open air space is on the unit you're seeing in the packet, there could be a sunshade fabric type of divider as well.
Great, thank you.
So Director Bove, based on the kind of conversation tonight, do you have any recommendations on how we best proceed in terms of providing you with more specific direction or giving you some time to look at some of those other questions that came up?
It sounds to me like the consensus of the board is at least that we're going to continue this program. I don't think there's any harm in preparing the grant, maybe over the next 2 weeks, so that by the next board meeting, we could, potentially approve a match or approve the submittal of that grant. I think being over prepared is fine. And I think as a backup plan of sorts, we could intend to just at the bare minimum purchase more barricades, spend $3,000 or $4,000 so that we still have barricades free for events. So I'm comfortable with the direction if I'm summarizing it correctly. But I think it sounds like we should prepare the grant and potentially approve it at the next meeting. And our backup plan would be maybe to purchase out of Park and Recs funds just some additional barricades if we decide to go with maybe a more humble setup.
Todd, what's the delay right now for getting the traditional barricades? Are we okay to have those in time?
I would think so. The holdup is usually just freight. Anything we order that comes freight or DHL generally can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months.
Okay.
And it can be very difficult to track those items.
My understanding, Todd, was that we would need to have more barricades of the traditional types if we were to have events this summer, so we could still have bump outs and events. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. It's just something to keep in mind for the trustees.
Thank you. Any further trustee direction to Director Bove? Trustee Harper?
Thank you, sir. I would like to see a show of hands for support for this, keeping it going through next summer. And also, I think this is a great idea, and I don't want to waste any time. If we're going to go in this direction and purchase these units, file for this grant, purchase them, and get it going, I think we should get on it now.
Thank you. Why don't we see it?
That's not a motion, but I guess I'd like to see a show of hands, though.
So let's break that into a couple things. So first, a show of hands in support of the bump outs and the proposal generally. So that looks unanimous. And then I guess a show of hands on supporting proceeding with the grant preparation. I guess we can still vote formally on whether or not to approve the grant application at the next meeting, but is everybody in support of the town staff spending time preparing the grant? Trustee Uyghur, was your hand down? I just want to make sure I'm representing it. Okay, great. All right, so that one's unanimous as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Harper.
If I may ask one question, because we're looking at the grant and looking at potentially a longer term program, did we want to get a consensus of the bump outs in perpetuity versus an extension of 1 year? Would that be helpful?
We can, though I think some of the questions relating to that, it would be helpful to get a little bit more feedback from you and staff with respect to comparing and contrasting the benefit and challenges with Blair Street versus Green, storage and parking and overall like pedestrian plan.
Certainly. Thank you. I think staff has what they need to proceed.
Okay. Thank you very much, Director Bove. All right. Circling back to ski joring, I saw that Interim Administrator Edwards shared the permit to our emails, but since that was on the fly, just do trustees feel comfortable looking at that issue now, or do we want to table that? Lisa?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, this is somewhat of a time critical issue because they are planning to film this coming weekend. And so I would not suggest tabling it beyond this meeting, if at all possible.
Thank you. So would you, Administrator Edwards, would you provide a just quick overview of what the permit entails to kind of supplement anyone's quick read of their email?
Sure. It's 2 pages. It was submitted by John Oakes, who was here at the last meeting. Has the date, the name, his address. The reason for closure is for documentary filming. The estimated number of vehicles is 10. The number of people is 20. It's February 25th through the 28th. The closure starts at 7 a.m. and ends at 4 p.m. It's the closure description and locations, I would say, are Grand Imperial, Lone Spur, Town Hall, Kendall Bank, Old Depot, Bent Elbow, Shady Lady, Train Cars, the Avon, Avalanche, Alma House, and Christ of the Mind Shrine. It's between historic Blair Street and Empire Street from 9th Street to 12th Street, blocks 1000, 1100, and 1200.
Thank you. Lisa?
If I may chime in, I just wanted to let the trustees know this application came in after the packets went out. And just with the changing of the guard in Town Hall, I apologize that this information did not get to you before tonight. I wanted to remind the trustees that the film permit piece of this can be approved administratively. The piece that we need trustees to weigh in on tonight is simply the closure of the public right-of-way. You all did approve funding this filming at the last trustee meeting. So this is the next logical step, is just crossing our T's and dotting our I's as far as getting the paperwork done. And if you recall, when we've spoken with Rebecca Berto of the Silverton Film Office, one of our current challenges in dealing with film crews is being responsive when they have requests for a street closure like this. And with us not being able to approve that administratively under certain circumstances, it does often pose a problem for our film crews. So just something to bear in mind as far as context around this. I did also want to pose a question to our ski joring organizers, because I see a discrepancy between the information provided on a street closure or the public right-of-way closure application. And I saw a map earlier today that they are prepping to share in the paper this week just to notify the public of the closure. And so I'm curious to know the start and end points of that closure. The application says 9th through 12th, and the map that I saw today says 8th through 14th. And so I just would like to clarify that point for the trustees so you all know what you're approving.
Hey, Lisa and the trustees, it's Karen. It is 8th through 14th because of the horse run out. It won't be as impactful as we normally are because of the minimum number of teams. So we're asking for those times and dates, and we'll open what we can when we're not filming.
Thank you for that clarification, Karen. I don't know how we need to modify an approval of this to reflect that difference, but the application is different than what they actually need. So Administrator Edwards, I will defer to you on how to phrase any kind of motion to approve.
Well, if there is a motion to approve, it should say to the 8th to the 14th, and the permit should be corrected as such.
Thank you. Trustee Barella?
Yes, there's also an additional discrepancy is the Grand Imperial Loansburg Town Hall and the bank are nowhere near the blocks that are going to be closed, and neither is the Christ of the Mines. So I'm a little confused, and neither is the Avalanche. I'm confused on these locations as well, not being covered properly in the closure and the timeframes that Main Street would be closed.
I do not believe they're asking for any closure of Main Street. The organizers can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe what you are describing there is additional locations they will be filming, but not necessarily street closure location.
So what the application says is closure and description location 4 blocks maximum. Please attach map. Grand Imperial Loansburg Town Hall, Kendall Bank, Old Depot, Bent's Elbow, Shady Lady, Train, Cars, Avon, Avalanche, Alma House, and Christ of the Mines, Historic Blair Street. So it's all in there under one lump item. So if it needs to be separated out, let's separate it out properly. So that way we don't have people, especially those who read the paper, getting a little bit confused like I already am on what days which areas are being closed, because we've also got a broad spectrum of February 25th through the 28th. Is it going to be closed on Blair Street only for that entire time frame? So I'm still confused. Thank you for clarifying.
So can we, thank you, Trustee Barella. Can we either allow John Oakes or Karen to respond to those, because we need to have that information for any sort of motion.
Yes, please.
John Oakes is here. I believe, did I unmute? Yes. There's 2 permits, as I understand it, the filming locations and the wide range from Thursday through the end of the filming, and then the road closure, which is specifically for the public works, moving of snow and whatnot that'll happen Thursday, Friday, and then the actual road closure on Saturday and Sunday. So the film permit lists the filming locations, and then the road closure lists specifically the road closure. So I think that there's 2 different applications, and one specifically for filming locations, the second for the road closure.
Thank you. I believe we only have the filming location permit.
We only have public right-of-way closure permit application in front of us.
A quick question as well. Have all of the businesses and homeowners that may be impacted by this road closure been contacted and given an opportunity to provide feedback?
The plan to do was to do that tomorrow with being in the newspaper, and then post on various Facebook and social media sites pending your approval.
And what happens if someone has a conflict with the closure?
Karen, do you want to speak to that? How we've managed it in years past? I know after a meeting with the sheriff on Saturday, there's one known resident that has, I believe, a mobility impairment with parking that we've accommodated in the past. And I'll let Karen speak to any additional details on how we've managed it last year and in years past.
That's correct. We just accommodate that gentleman's vehicle. He doesn't have to move it. And I guess we would just be accommodating and make it work.
Great. So I guess the question I'm getting at is, in the past, ski journey's been scheduled far in advance. It's expected exactly what's happening. People can plan around it. Businesses can plan around it. We're getting this permit today on Monday. We're talking about closing the road this coming weekend. The winter's been pretty busy for a lot of businesses. I'm not sure how excited, I mean, hopefully everybody's excited for this, but there could be businesses that are impacted negatively by this, and we're only giving them a few days notice. And so I guess what I was asking is if you guys actually gone door to door and let everyone know that is along these closures that there won't be parking, that there will be snow piled up in front of their businesses, and any other potential impacts of doing this with such short notice. I don't think I can vote yes on this if our plan is just to put this in the newspaper and then all of a sudden close the streets in front of businesses this weekend without giving those people the opportunity to let us know that maybe they have an event or something else planned that could have a conflict.
We typically post public notices. I know Karen was printing those today, and again, the plan on your approval to give notice with your approval. And I don't know the code, but I know that there is a term that we have to have posted signs publicly, not just in the newspaper. And again, the community communication is of the utmost importance. And the plan is, again, with your approval, to do that insistently over the next few days, so no one's surprised come Saturday and Sunday.
Thank you. I guess one other quick question is since this isn't actually a formal event, is there a reason this had to take place on a weekend and couldn't have been done on like a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday when town's a little bit slower?
The staff, the horses, like the horse owners and the skiers are not available Monday through Friday. And that's why the filming in town is extending Monday through Thursday. So people that live locally that we're interviewing can be interviewed. And then the only days that we can get the horses and skiers up is that particular weekend. This weekend, they're not available the following weekend because Leadville is running. And so this was the only weekend available to do it and the only days available to do it.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you. Well, trustees, any other questions, or what would you like to do about the request for this permit?
My question is still for John Seitz in Public Works. Are they able to assist them on in the time frame that they need? You'll have to forgive me, everybody. I'm pretty sick, but John Seitz, are you able to move snow and build jumps and do the work needed for them on their on their schedule?
Yes.
As long as we're supporting our town employees and they can do it and it doesn't cut into their regular duties, I think I'm all for it.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Can we make a motion to conditionally approve? It sounds like time is of the essence, and we've already expressed, we've already committed the money to this project. And so to make that work for them, could we conditionally approve the application with the 8th to the 14th Street modification, and that the noticing and accommodations for businesses and residents starts tomorrow? I don't know if that makes sense. that's maybe a question for you, Mr. Edwards.
I think you would approve under that they meet that criteria. And then if you find out they're not doing it tomorrow, then you need to know that we'll need to give notice to them that they didn't meet that criteria. Does that make sense?
Trustee Barella?
One more question. So is this also a waiver of the street closure fees as well? Since they're listed here as 500 per day, 4 blocks in increments, another right of way, 250 per day, 4 blocks, 4-hour increments. Is that also being asked? Lisa, thank you.
Lisa?
Thank you, Mayor Furman. 81433 nonprofits are not subject to street closure fees for this type of event.
Okay, so we're considering that an in-kind like we always used to then?
Yes, presumably. When we look at what our total cost is for supporting any event in town, we typically add together street closures with this particular event, or something like the whiteout where we're doing a lot of course building. We look at the number of hours that the public works crew spends doing snow grooming and building courses for those events. And we add that all up and look at that as an in-kind donation. You are correct.
Thank you for that clarification. So I do support Sally's somewhat motion to approve this road closure permit conditionally that immediately tomorrow or even tonight, businesses and residents who would be affected by this are notified. I'm going to say, I don't know, how are we going to make sure, help me with this. Are you guys going to walk around with a piece of paper that the business owners sign off on with their name and addresses like you would a petition? Or are you going to collect, I just want to know how. I mean, I like Sally's way of thinking there, but how is it going to be accomplished and proven other than the newspaper?
Thank you, Trustee Barella. And I'd just add one more question to that too, which is what happens if someone does express a concern or a conflict? How do we address that?
My suggestion is that that people can bring that to the board at the next trustee meeting.
Well, that would be a week and a half after the fact.
But it would be before the activities that took place on there, and that we could look at mitigating any sort of concerns.
I'm confused. Isn't that this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
That's correct.
Okay, fair enough. I thought there was a later date.
And I'm not aware, has any of the business ownership changed in the last year or historically that would be impacted any differently when the event's historically run? Because from an operations standpoint, the road closure and the activity on the road is nearly identical to what's happened in the past. There's a couple less snow features. We're not building the grandstands for crowd, and there won't be crowd, but it's the same activity that any business on the road has experienced in the past, with the horses and the skiers running down the road for the course and then the run out at the end. So it's not a new concept.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
I thought that Karen's willingness to accommodate, and John, I think, is they've both expressed that. I don't know if we can somehow just indicate that accommodations will be made or can be made for any conflicts or opposition to the events. And yeah.
Thank you. And John or Karen, do you want to address Trustee Barella's question about the specific mechanism for notifying all affected business or property owners?
Yeah, my recommendation and what our action plan would be to make the newspaper tomorrow immediately through electronic communications, email, as well as post on multiple Facebook pages the information about the closure, and then do as we have historically in the past, post signage on each of the roadways, historically have we've done in the past, and then create a key contact, right? If somebody has some sort of exception that they need access, they can contact either Karen or myself. We'll designate one of us to be that key point of contact. And so we can try to accommodate if somebody's pregnant, having a baby, or expecting a really special delivery or something, as long as we have communication with them and they need to be able to get access with the vehicle on the street to their business and or residence, we'll make, and I'll say reasonable accommodations, right? We can't stop a horse from running when we've got cameras set, but if we know that it, 12, from 12 to 1 o'clock, we're expecting a very important delivery, we'll make our best accommodation to pause filming activities. So whatever very important delivery or, access can happen.
And I will go and knock on everyone's door tomorrow, leave a note with a business card. So if I'm not able to talk to them in person, they can call me with concerns.
Thank you.
And have you made contact with Silverton Ambulance just to have them on standby?
I sent an email right after the last board meeting we had, and I've only heard back from Bruce. And in that, I asked if we needed to have the ambulance on site. And if we did, I wanted to reserve that. And I don't know the answer.
Okay. Well, historically, we've had an ambulance and a paramedic crew on scene, but there were also a lot more people, bystanders, etc. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's needed this time, but something to think about.
I think it's probably a good idea to have that.
And I think we had an impromptu meeting with Bruce over the weekend, and pending approval of this, we'll put the call out in the request to have them on standby. And for clarity, there is four jockeys and 2 skiers that are scheduled to participate. So the field is much smaller and the activity is much smaller than what we would historically see. Again, just more focused on the beauty shots for the filming and the interviews and the documentary.
One last question for me. Have you worked with the public health department to make sure that whatever plans you have match whatever COVID restrictions or other requirements are in place?
We have two COVID compliant officers like on the production crew that have gone through training outside of the local health authority, but through a national training program. They'll be on site, and we're familiar with the safety protocols. We've put messages out, but we haven't had a specific conversation with her going over the plan, but that'll happen immediately tomorrow. We'll have the 2 COVID compliant officers get in touch with her tomorrow.
Thank you. Just a question for staff. In the past, we've required for events that there be some type of approval from our public health department, but this isn't a normal event. It's really a filming permit. So are we good with that plan since this is distinct?
Yeah, so there are definitely some discrepancies here as compared to what we do with a normal special event application. I will say that we do pass our street closure applications by individuals for approval. So John Seitz, for example, and the sheriff, for example, do receive those. In my conversations with Rebecca Berto and discussion about how film crews typically work, my understanding is that they generally do come with their own trained professionals in that area. I do not think that they have been required, any of the film crews that have been shooting in the area have not been required specifically to connect with the OEM office regarding approvals. If that is something that the health department or the Office of Emergency Management or the trustees would like to see, we can certainly incorporate that into our process.
Thank you. It sounds like in that case, John and Karen have gone above and beyond with respect to that by having 2 COVID compliant officers. So trustees, any more questions or comments, or do we want to convert one of the quasi motions into a formal motion?
I'd be happy to try and convert.
Okay, and I see Trustee Burrell has her hand up as well.
Or Trustee Barella, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's fine, Tally, you do it. I was just gonna say the same thing, as long as we've got all the points in there to convert it. Thank you.
All right, well, I guess I will make a motion to approve the road closure application and filming location application from Ski Drawing, including the change in the streets from to the 8th to the 14th, as well as the notification tomorrow of residents and business owners and accommodations of any issues for them.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Good job, Tally, that was tough.
Thank you, Trustee Barella. Clerk Free, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Recuse.
trustee Wager,
Yes.
trustee Bierma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Thank you, John. Thank you, Karen, for joining us tonight and for bearing with all of our questions.
Thank you. We look forward to having a fun, safe production and doing a great job. We'll hopefully see or wave at most of you over the next week or 2. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Sounds good. Have a good night. All right. Was there anything else on budget versus actual for January sales tax collection update, or were we good with the update from Clerk Freeze before noting the collections and the percent above projected? Trustee Barella?
This is 2 months in arrearages, correct? So Kelly, are you there? For 2021, you're saying January's collection, which was actually November's. Am I right on that?
Yes.
Okay, and then December's is listed in February, so we won't really, all right, that's good to know. I'm actually impressed with November being as high as it was, which is the 43% or 41.93% change. And do we know if this had to do with internet sales? Have we ever been able to receive a breakdown on that from the county, which says what's actually like landlocked businesses versus internet sales, because that could be a lot of Christmas shopping. Just curious, because we've never been able to find out those numbers. Have you received anything like that, Kelly?
No, I have not.
So is it worth asking for again? I don't even know if Willie actually gets it. I think we've asked this before, since he collects all the sales tax for the county and then disperses it. Is that something we can find out?
I will put a sticky note for that and try and find out.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other budget related questions? All right. Moving on to new business 4C, review and consideration to approve interim town administrator contract agreement with Anthony Edwards, noting the date corrections need to be made to section 3A, where it's referring to 2020 twice, as well as the acknowledgement on below the SIG block, also referring to 2020. Any discussion, questions, or motions? Trustee Rella?
Under delivery of service and hours, where does it actually, best efforts to perform a timely and professional manner? Where does it actually say how many hours? Did I miss it? I found the dollar amount, but it doesn't actually show me. Or can somebody help me find it? Where are the hours that contact will be in person at town hall? And this is typically a 40-hour-a-week job. Is that in there, or did I miss it someplace?
Anthony, you're muted.
It's actually the interim administrator contract that's been used historically. It was the one that was provided to former administrator Ryder before he went on full-time. The only change is that I'm not provided with housing, and that it's approximately $600 less a month, but it is verbatim what's been used traditionally.
I might have asked this question then too, just because the compensation doesn't say the hours. So thank you for clarifying, and it's still not.
So Trustee Burrell, are you requesting a revision to the form to include that this is a full-time commitment, or are you happy with the form as used previously?
I might have asked it, like I said, I might have asked at the last meeting as well, because we're not clarifying the amount of hours for the rate of compensation where contractually we have. So no, if it's been used repeatedly, that's fine, but I've asked the question, I believe, before, and I'm going to ask it again, because I think that needs to be clarified.
Absolutely, and I'm just asking it, would you like to make that request that the board consider making that modification?
I think it's necessary.
Thank you. Administrator Edwards, any concern with that modification?
No. Are we wanting to change it to an hourly wage though? Is that where we're going?
My understanding was just the clarification, this is a full-time commitment for the rate of pay, not to change it to an hourly rate of pay. Trustee Burrell, is that correct?
Yes.
I'd also note from my perspective in protecting the town, there's a pretty easy to exercise termination provision. So if the hours or other expectations were not meeting those of the board, it's relatively simple to exercise a termination, which seems like a good protection for the town.
I actually, I think if we're going to go to full-time, I think we need to define that, and maybe we'll go hourly. I think it needs to be defined so I have a good idea what full-time means.
Would defining 40 hours a week be sufficient?
Sure. I mean, it just needs to be clear as a contractor versus an employee, right? How that's going to be defined.
I understand. I think from my perspective, going to hourly would be a concern for the board because then we'd have to keep track very closely on what the compensation is. And this provides us with a pretty decent certainty of what the cost will be to the town. But I also understand your concern about wanting to set a clear expectation of your time commitment. So would you be okay with us adding that this is expected to be a 40-hour commitment per week?
Sure, that's fine. I think that what needs to be understood though is that it could be a lot more some weeks. And so how are we going to, do you want me to book my hours each day?
I see the issue here, but I think that the vagueness in it previous, so I don't think that Trustee Burrell is actually trying to make a change to what the commitment is for this role with respect to the town, just clarifying in the contract some baseline expectation of it being a full-time role. But I take your point in terms of if we're going to define it, we might as well define it very specifically. But I guess I don't have a great solution on the fly for how to cover the town's concern as well as yours. Any other trustees have a suggestion? Trustee Burma?
I'd say I'm okay with the way the contract's worded the way it is. I think with that termination clause, like you mentioned, and a list of things to do and the fluctuation in how many hours he might work one week versus the next, I feel like that covers us just fine as long as the work is getting done. I think there's a general understanding that some weeks will be much more labor intensive than others.
Thank you. Trustee Barella, how do you feel about that?
I still have issues with it because it is a full-time commitment. I think previous administrators said that they worked on average under salary-based compensation, approximately at least 50 hours per week versus 40. If we look at the amount of time that Mark Garcia and so on when he was interim. So there's been a lot of interims that have received different sort of, we're allowing you to work here and then you don't have to be here this time because of the travel time, or we provided housing and so on. But it is just a full-time commitment. And I've always questioned why that's not in. It should be here. I'm sorry, it should be here. It doesn't matter if you're interim or not. When you're taking on this role, the time commitment is what is so demanding about the role. So it doesn't have to be changed. Like I said, if I'm the only one that thinks it needs to be that way, that's fine. Then future contracts going forward, I want it noted that I want it worded better, I guess, to make sure that we have an understanding for anybody who takes the interim role that it really is full-time, and it needs the utmost attention certain times. So that's, I guess I've said my piece. It doesn't matter. If you guys don't want to do it now, that's fine. But I believe that going forward, it should be.
Thank you. I think my take is that I think that both parties have sufficient flexibility to exit the contract if it's not working. And so I'm happy with it as is, but I do agree with Trustee Barella that we can put some more thought into future versions of the contract to better define what the expectations are so that we don't have any type of misalignment. Trustee Harper.
Thank you, sir. So there is no expectations of a true 40-hour work week. So is it a 30-hour work week? Is it a 20-hour work week? Are we for that interim position?
Well, I think to everyone's point so far about how the hours can be demanding and sometimes more than others, the more important descriptors in here says that that he will attend all meetings and work sessions of the board, execute duties and responsibilities identified within the town administrator's job description, and manage and oversee the operations and functions of all town departments and staff in conjunction with board direction, as well as work with town staff and contractors on projects and tasks outlined by the board, and so on. So I almost feel like we're getting a better deal by not limiting the number of hours to 40 hours a week if he has to meet all of those obligations. And whether he's efficient or not, he still has to meet those obligations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee George?
Yeah, I would like to echo your sentiment. I think in my experience, the people that have been on salary and, you know, they have to have deliverables, et cetera, they end up working much more than 40 hours a week. And, you know, if we have a good termination contract or clause, then if he isn't delivering the you know, deliverables, etc., then that's fine. But I think it does, like Mayor Furman said, I think it works out in our favor. I don't see how it wouldn't. So, and especially knowing Anthony. So,
Thank you. Trustee Harper?
Yes, sir. I know the judge as well. I think it's great. And is there a motion? Can we put a motion out there to approve this?
Yeah, would you like to make a motion to approve the contract with 2020 dates correction to 2021?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
You so move?
Yep.
I can second it.
So Trustee Harper made the motion and Trustee George seconded. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Absolutely, yes.
Trustee Weigert?
Yes.
Trustee Bearman?
Yes.
Trustee George?
yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes. Thank you very much. Moving on to presentation and discussion of the quality of life survey. With a quick note that the Standard posted that this survey was put out by the Kendall Committee, and they've taken that down. That was an incorrect mention. So just clarifying that as we kick this off.
Mr. Edwards, I'm ready to share screen whenever you are ready to move forward.
Okay. Go ahead, Mrs. Sperano. Okay, so in August of last year, there was a quality of life survey. And this is an abbreviated presentation of that survey for this evening, in the sense that it's a lot more, has a lot more depth than what we have time this evening, just in respect for time and what's important for us to get to through this evening. I want to go on to the next slide. Just a little bit on the survey. There were a lot of, well, there were questions, and they were really more based on qualitative, which means asking how somebody feels, or open-ended questions that's data that characterizes or gives feedback. Not as easily measurable necessarily as a quantitative, like a data that can be counted or tallied, such as a ballot initiative or an election with officials. So it takes a while to sift through that data. That survey came out from town in August of 2020. It was open-ended questions, and that survey was promoted. I don't know, Mrs. Branner, can you, Lisa, can you just expand on the promotion of the survey at that time?
Yes, indeed. So it was sent out through a variety of channels. We did email it to a variety of different email lists, the town emails list, the county sent it out. It was shared with all of the chamber members. Silverton School also sent it out to their contacts, and then Silverton Creative District emailed it out. So we were trying to hit as broad a group of community members as we could via email. There were posters and flyers hung around town. There were announcements in the Silverton Standard. It was shared all over social media. And then we also had it featured on the front page of the town website. And we gave folks just over a month, I think it was 45 days, to respond to the survey.
Thanks, Lisa. Next slide, please. Okay, so there were 219 unique responses. Of those responses, 28% identified themselves as, of the individuals responding as seasonal residents, where 72% were year-round residents. Go on to the next slide. In regards to the question of how do you make a living in Silverton, 31% identified themselves as self-employed, 25% work for Silverton business, and almost 20% were retired, 19.2% work remotely, and then 4% were, almost 5% there were unemployed. I think it's interesting that even though it was 219 responses, that we're moving close to 40% of people who were either working remotely or were retired, a different type of income coming into the community. Next slide, Lisa. So when we look at activities that the individuals who filled out the survey and those activities, a vast majority participate in hiking, running, or walking. A large amount are the respondents in camping, and then as we go down, you see other recreational activities, biking, skiing, snowboarding, fishing, mountaineering, kayaking, jeeping, snowmobiling, hunting, OHV, dirt bike. So there was a wide variety of activities that some people identified 2 or 3 or more, just so you can understand the results. Next slide, Lisa. So I asked Lisa to put together a word cloud for the things people love and the things they dislike. Those were the questions, and it was 3 things you love about Silverton and what are 3 things you dislike about Silverton. On the side of love, community and town, mountains came up, the people, the beauty, hiking, walking. And then when we have the things that dislike, some people said community as well, divisiveness, OHVs, noise, ATVs, environment, and summer. So there's a wide variety of responses here. And if we dig a little deeper, if we can go on to the next slide, three things you love about the community. Again, approximately 36% of respondents identified the mountains specifically as one of the things they love. And then approximately 24% of respondents identified community. And just to be clear on that analysis, they talked about community, the town, their neighbors. And so a quarter of the respondents identified the community and their neighbors in town as something that they love about Silverton. So next slide. Three things that, when people chose three things that they dislike, approximately 45% of the respondents identified OHVs specifically as one of the things they dislike. That came in the form of either OHV, ATV, or Razor. Approximately 18% of the respondents identified impacts associated with those. That included noise, dust, and pollution, specifically as one of the things they dislike. There's, again, things they dislike are included divisiveness. There were a lot of different answers scattered throughout there. And those surveys are available in the packet and available online with a link that was sent out to the different members of the community. Next slide, please. So the key takeaways that really reviewing this are that, one, respondents value the sense of the community, their natural surroundings, and access to outdoor recreation, and that crosses over to all types of different users or people recreating and people in the community. Number two is OHVs are creating negative impacts to the quality of life for a significant portion of the community. Again, that was 45% of 219 people. So we're coming up on 100 who really identified that they were feeling negatively impacted by OHV traffic or dust or some sort of impact from those activities. Finally, on third, the respondents would like an atmosphere to be less divisive and to work together towards solutions. And so those were the real three takeaways in reviewing the survey. I want to go to the next slide. And so the recommendations for trustee consideration at this point are form a community task force to study and make recommendations about the management of OHVs. So a management plan of some sort to address some of these issues that some of our neighbors have identified. And then second, we're to engage in a professional firm or a data analysis to synthesize and expand upon the data gathered through this survey. And community builders came to mind and was brought up in discussions that I had with Lisa, but it could be whoever the board would be interested in further expanding on this survey. Are there any questions at this time? Okay, so do we want to go on to the next line, or does anybody have any questions about the survey or results?
Lisa, would you end the screen share so I could see everyone? Thank you. Trustee Burma?
Not a question, more just a comment. I think this data gathering is really useful. And one word that I read through all the comments and collected a bunch of statistics as well. And I noticed one thing that didn't come up in the word wall was the term self-sufficient came up often. And I think it's because it's two words versus one. But that was just an interesting thing to note.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yeah, I'm excited to, I think this is pretty dense, and it was really fun to read through it and read what everybody had to say. And my question is sort of related to the last slide that you ended on, Mr. Edwards, which is just where do we go from here? It sounds like this would be a really good segue to community builders or an outside firm, but just wanting to think about what's the next move with this information.
Sure. Thank you, Trustee Barney. I think there's two things. We're getting ready to talk about. One of those recommendations is to talk about a management plan for this summer coming up. But in regards to the data, I think that data can be reviewed by a data scientist or my community builders. It could be expanded upon what's been brought forth. It could be used to inform additional surveys or to drill down on some subject. And I think we just need to, maybe discuss that at a different meeting or in a committee meeting at some point.
Thank you. Trustee Barella?
Yes, this done in the middle of August leads me to believe that very few people actually responded. If people only gotten 219, what is our estimated population with all of our summer residents that show up? I don't think 219 is a very significant response in reference to this. I was just digging through my brain trying to remember if I received it, but in August, I'm very busy as a business owner. So if I did, it didn't come across my plate as something significant. So I agree with what Anthony said there, potentially leading this and segueing it into a different type of survey might be a little bit better, one that we can get more responses, one that's maybe even, I know email is probably the least expensive form of communication, but maybe this is something that the questions could be formed a little bit less open-ended, and it was delivered to all individual box holders to really get a real good consensus of the pulse of the actual town. I'm not saying that 219 isn't the actual town, but it seems kind of on the low side to me for responses for a quality of life survey. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a question I had as well about the number of responses. Administrator Edwards or Lisa, would you like to kind of compare and contrast the response volume relative to other outreach the town's done historically? Because I thought that answer I found compelling when I asked the same question.
I think there have been surveys and that have been put out over time. I mean, I don't remember the exact number right now, Mayor Furman. I know that our master plan that we have currently had less than this. I'm not sure how many. It is a different type of survey though on that. Lisa, do you know the number that we have of a recent survey? Or actually even more importantly, maybe what is considered a good turnout on this type of survey, percentage-wise?
I can speak to that we received in the realm of 150 responses, I believe, with some of the Kendall surveys that we did. I am not recalling how many survey responses we got to some of the other recent surveys we've done. I would have to go look that up, but there have been several. We did do the one-way street plan survey also this past summer. There are a couple of different COVID-19 community impact surveys that have gone out jointly between several different organizations. And I am on a PIO list for the Colorado Municipal League, where I do recall a conversation being had about community surveys. And I actually thought by comparison, we were doing quite well. It might take me a second to find the email thread to get you some numbers, but I certainly can either report back at a future meeting, or if you bear with me, I can try to dig through my emails right now and find that. But I believe that the number of responses we have received is actually fairly significant, considering what type of response we've received to other engagement that has happened in the community over the last decade.
And the note that I have, and I just pulled it up to make sure, the 2010 master plan had a total of 120 participants. So this is 100 more than that. And only one very small piece of the information that will ultimately go into, making big decisions and a master plan revision process. So I found that compelling that, we had such a small number for a 2010 town and county master plan relative to what we got on this survey. Trustee Barella?
Yeah, so I'd be curious on the 2010 master plan. How did that actually go out to the community? Was it delivered to their PO boxes, or was it some sort of disseminated email list? Because I think that's the biggest problem with this, in my opinion, is how it's put out and when. I'm glad to see that this was done in the middle of summer, but like I said, for a lot of us, we're just a little bit too busy to fill it out. And there are a lot of people, myself now included, who don't use social media. And what other form of communication? I guess that's my biggest concern with all of this. Anytime it goes out, it's only going out via digital or social media versus actually contacting people, which is what your post office box does. Thank you.
Thank you. I would say I feel pretty comfortable with email getting most people these days, but I take your point that about the paper version as well. And I think that's why the town put out the flyers as well, to try and make people aware of this. But you're correct that it was only participatable in a digital forum. Lisa, you have your hand up?
Yes, so I did find the information I was looking for from the town of Windsor. They consider themselves a tiny town of 13,000 households, which I find hilarious. But they said out of 13,000 households, they've gotten 400 responses to a SurveyMonkey survey that they sent out, and they were pleased with that result. So just to give you a sense of what type of a response may be typical, even in a much larger community than ours.
Thank you. And this also seems like something we can field with community builders as well. They do this all the time, and they can tell us whether these are, helpful results or not significant enough. And I think that's why staff's recommendation to kick this over to community builders is a good one. I definitely support that. I also, thank you. Yeah, I also just want to thank those who did participate in this. I read through all the responses, and there's a lot of substance in there. There are a lot of really cool vision statements, and people definitely spent time and energy. And I think this board is only as good as the input we get. And so the more community input we get that's thoughtful, like the responses were to this, the better decisions we can make on the town's behalf. So thank you to the community. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yeah, thanks. That was kind of my observation too, that I just wanted to say is it sounds, I mean, I thought I had a different reaction, but I thought 219 people was significant in our small community, but I also thought it was significant because the questions were open-ended. So it took a little bit more thought and time. And it looks like just from reading through what people wrote, people really did put a lot of thought and time into responding. And I thought that was really helpful just to read through what people really care about. And because it was, it asked for an extensive answer if you wanted to give it, and people were willing to share. And I thought that was important, and it showed a good level of care in our community.
So any other thoughts about the presentation or the survey or next steps? Trustee Barella and then Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
I think the community does need to get together. I think this was a very good conversation that Eric Lawyer brought up at our previous meeting, wanting to get this started and what it's going to look like from all reservations from around Colorado. We have now been promoted as a tourism state. So we have to be careful what we wish for because we've gotten it. We are a tourist-based economy. We are reliant right now on the OHV traffic that comes through. And once again, not to pick on the train, but 2018, we didn't have a train, and 2020, we didn't have a train. And that was the individual businesses, not businesses, that was the individuals that did impact our economy the most. So am I in agreement that we should be more diverse? Undoubtedly, but this is what we've got and we need to deal with it. We need to deal with it in a proper manner. Signage, I don't care what it takes to create a better environment for all of this to go forward, because no matter what, we've got it coming, like Mr. Lawyer said, within 10 weeks, now probably 9 weeks. So a group of us getting together, I don't care if it's board members, community members, however it needs to be done, whoever wants to head it. I am fully 100% ready to participate in these meetings because it needs to happen, and we need to be openly discussing what we need. What do we need to rein this in? I like the permit process idea myself, just like they're doing for Ice Lake, that X amount of permits are given out for the county. I mean, whatever the conversation needs to have happen, we need to do it because it is our responsibility as a board to make sure that going forward, we are protecting our community, we are stabilizing our economy, we are loving whatever tourists we have at the moment. So what are we going to do to make sure we can move forward positively, get the sheriff's department out of the town so much, get them out more into the backcountry, which is, it seems like where they need to be. This is the conversation that needs to take place. How are we going to move forward? I vote for a committee.
Thank you, Trustee Varela, for a sneak peek of our next agenda item. But duly noted on all those points. Mayor Pro Tem Barney and then Trustee George.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to expressing support for taking the information from the survey and integrating it or kicking it over to a community builders type organization to help us dissect and make meaning of that, all of the information in it. I just wanted to express support for that next step.
Thank you. Trustee George?
It's my understanding that we can't add a license to OHVs coming through town. So
I didn't interrupt Trustee Varela, but can we add this one to the, because the very next agenda item is discussion of OHV strategy. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So beyond suggestions to request that community builders also review the survey and give us some feedback, any other immediate next steps with respect to the survey? Trustee Harper?
Thank you, sir. Are we moving forward with community builders? Have we decided that that's the route in the group that we want to go with?
My understanding is that was kind of already done weeks and weeks ago, and that they've put in a lot of time to be aggregating leadership teams and creating strategy. We didn't get an update from them recently. They were very close with the group that was affected by the avalanche by Overpass that had some deaths in it. And so they took a couple of weeks off to kind of recalibrate. But I believe that I was copied on an email a week and a half ago where they mentioned, getting geared up to keep going. But I defer to Administrator Edwards. That's about all I know about that.
Yes, there's a smaller group that's working with community builders. And again, they did have people that they lost here in the county during that tragic event that we had. And they were working with some of those people that we lost were people that they were actually working with in Eagle County. So we're a little delayed, but I think we can go forward and working with the chamber and others to move that forward. Trustee Harper, just to be clear.
Perfect, thank you. I did have a few comments with regards to the survey. I guess everyone seems to believe that 219 people is enough. I guess that's good. I found it interesting on this little word cluster, 3 things that people dislike, and picked out some of the words. People dislike business. They dislike tourists. They dislike visitors. They dislike winter. They dislike skiing. They dislike the economy, and they dislike money. I find this survey to be interesting in the sense that OHVs are the biggest, and that's the biggest word there in that cluster. I'm assuming the survey was done at the end of July, early August, and I believe it was several folks on this board and a lot of folks in the community that showed concern for the obvious reasons that folks were running amok around town and out in the backcountry. And it was also the same time earlier in the summer that our signage had been removed and hadn't been put back up. And I know this is probably going to be a question for our next segment, but have we even purchased signs? Have we tried to do that? Have we tried to further educate the public? Because that's a glaring, this word cluster, the OHVs, that's a glaring omission on our part, that we've dropped the ball. And I feel bad about this. Thank you.
Thank you. So pretty fortuitous timing that our next agenda item is addressing this issue. Do we want to close the loop on anything survey related? Trustee Wiegert, any thoughts, or should we move on to the next item? So are we good with a direction to staff to send the survey to community builders to kind of vet and extrapolate anything helpful from their perspective? I know that they were aware of the survey and were eager to see it as a kind of jumping off point for them to begin engaging with the community. That was something that they mentioned on a master plan committee meeting where they presented. No objections? Okay. Discussion of summer OHV strategy, next steps. Administrator Edwards.
Sure. I just want to follow the last discussion and the segue this one into, I think everybody knows that the town trustees are responsible for the health, safety, and welfare. There are some people who are feeling a little inundated. At the same time, we need to recognize that there are businesses that are directly impacted by what rules we make, and that their livelihood, that would be the rental companies, are dependent upon how things are now, and their workers and workers inside of indirectly in businesses from these visitors that we have on OHVs. And so we have to balance this out. And so when we think about that, we need to really, I think it's important, even though it may not be the majority, at least on the record, who have these issues, we need to try to be neighborly here. And I think it's important for us to do so. With that said, Trustee Barella had mentioned previously some ideas, and I think I've heard a lot of ideas in the last week from different people on how we can manage this. I would recommend a consideration of setting up a committee that include a spectrum of different positions on this issue, but people who are really wanting to find solutions to managing it, and that we ask that they come back to us in the next probably 4 weeks. Just because we need to have and if they have recommendations sooner, that would be great.
Are you talking about like an OHV strategy task force?
Yes, like a management task force to identify what solutions we can put in place. If in the next 2 weeks would be great if there's some that could come and to keep together long term for us to engage with the community.
What are you thinking for the composition of that task force?
Well, I think it's important to have somebody who, it needs to involve the spectrum of the community. I think that Eric Lawyer should be on that committee. He is a business owner. He's invested, and he came out and brought it up to the community and got out in front of this in some respect, I would say. And I think unless he can't commit to it, I think he should be on the committee. And Trustee Barella mentioned him earlier, and I think she was right.
Would it make sense for this so this would be something with like the sheriff's department, fire department, and then a spectrum of citizens? And is this something you'd be heading up, or what are you thinking there?
I don't want to. I think the trustees need to identify if that's what they want to do and who they want on point off staff. I mean, if that's me, that's me. I think also you mentioned the fire department and the sheriff's department, and they have to be involved. They know what their limitations are and what their bandwidth is, so to speak, but also public works, town. I mean, one of the issues was dust. That's a town responsibility, or it would be.
Search and rescue.
Thanks,
Search and rescue.
Trustee
Yeah.
Harper. That's a great.
Trustee Barella and then Trustee George.
Let Tyler speak. My internet is unstable again.
Okay. Trustee George.
Yeah, I would say health and safety. So EMS, we're definitely worried about OHVs, causing an accident in town, and having us involved in any sort of committee or working group to decide how we're going to move forward with this, I don't know, issue would be beneficial, I think.
What are you thinking? So 2 thoughts I have questions are, what are you thinking in terms of total number of participants? And then the other question is this something where there's trustee representation, or is it better for trustees to remain as kind of a unit that this task force can report back to, since there's inevitably many town leadership people involved with all of these different groups represented?
Well, I think Public Works, the director of EMS, Kim Holland, the director of Search and Rescue, and the head Chief Archuleta, because any accident that is going to involve an OHV is going to involve the fire department. So, and yeah, I think that involving those people along with administrator, or the interim administrator Anthony Edwards, and a couple of town trustees, or 1 or 2 town trustees, would be important.
Trustee Barella, your hand icon is still up, but I'm not sure if you're trying to speak.
Yeah, I lowered it and then I put it back up. thank God the Zoom tells me when I have unstable internet, and I'm not losing the meetings anymore. Keeping my video off. No, this is a big picture. We need that involvement. Eric Lawyer, after he presented to the town of Silverton, he presented to the Chamber of Commerce and brought it to our attention as well. I do wear two hats in that arena. So he's right. This is what we need to do. So it doesn't matter to me how many people are on there. Everybody is pointing out all of the important people that need to be there. So let's start making it. Let's start getting it together. I'm volunteering right now as a trustee, as also as a chamber member. I think Tyler would have a good voice. I think everybody he also mentioned already would have a good voice. This is something that we need. I think we need county involvement too, because it involves all of us. This has been a larger discussion for quite some time. Who from the county could come in and represent that, because we do need all parties represented. We want to make sure we have a broad spectrum. Maybe one of the deputies, who knows, but let's get the criteria right now. Let's say 3 members of the trustees, 1 or 2 members of staff, and then all of the other organizations that Tyler already listed, because this is vital and important to us moving forward for the future.
I think it's also equally important that we have a pretty wide variety of community members represented that are not business owners. I think we've had some pretty heavy business owner leadership in town for a very long time, and it's essential that we have other people that also balance the viewpoints that aren't necessarily only looking at this economically. Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yeah, I think this committee idea is a really good one, and could make some really creative recommendations to the board. I think it's really important that the committee is mixed stakeholders and people who can bring a balanced perspective and solution-mindedness to the work, so that it can really be a solution-oriented committee that leads to a workable idea. So not one or the other, a mixed group of thinkers that are willing to compromise. And another group of stakeholders that came to mind kind of in the spirit of this would be maybe even someone from Silverton Single Track, just because they're also developing use in the backcountry. And then the other thing is I had a chance to talk to Eric recently. Actually, I know he'd be really interested in serving on this committee, and he had another really good idea that would be that to establish the committee so that it can continues to work, and it isn't just sort of this speedy solution in the next few weeks that we try to get going for this summer, but that it also meets again throughout the year to reflect and revise and refine whatever it proposes and then gets implemented. And I thought that was a really important aspect of the committee, that it be a living and breathing committee, and it comes back so that we don't just keep making decisions and then having to return to them again. And then the other thing that I thought would be really helpful, and I'm not sure if it's a recommendation tonight or if it just gets integrated into the committee's work, if that's the direction we decide to go, which it sounds like it might be, would be, again, to just have that group really have access to good data about costs and benefits, so that decisions that are recommended to the board and what the board is presented with can be as data-based, data-driven decisions as possible.
Thank you. I'm a glutton for punishment, so I'm going to ask one other, I think, request to shape the scope of the committee's task, or this task force, if it's not, I don't know what it is exactly, but instead of requesting that they come back and provide us with a singular recommendation, because I think this is starting to sound like it's probably like more than 10 people, just based on stakeholder representatives, without even having a mixed variety of viewpoints from community members that are not the typical stakeholder representatives. So instead of a singular recommendation to the board, I think it would be helpful to ask that task force to create I'm guessing there's going to be a pro OHV and an anti OHV sentiment among this, and then a bunch of people in the middle. And so perhaps we can get 3 different proposals, one that leans in favor of those who are embracing OHV tourism and that portion of the community the most, those that are something that leans more towards those that are opposed to that portion of the community, and then something right in the middle, so that we've got a variety of options to consider. Trustee Barella?
I disagree with you on that point. You're pitting each other against each other rather than trying to come up with a cohesive solution that is best for the community. All working groups, when you work together from all different viewpoints, when you coalesce and you come up with good strategies and good ideas, you're actually taking everybody, valuing their what they bring to the table, and you're putting it all into one. Yeah, the pitting each other against each other is not a good way forward. It doesn't work well, because once again, you're creating a divisiveness rather than being goal oriented and working towards a solution that is good for all, not good for individual parties. Thank you.
So let me further clarify. So the idea would be that the entire task force would agree on all 3 options, so that we don't have, a third that come up with one version, a third that come up with another, and then some combination in between. We've all known that this issue's been coming. The whole community thinks about this with decent regularity, regardless of the viewpoint on what the desired outcome is for the individual. And I've definitely spent a lot of time thinking about this and talking to community members about it. And I think that the most compromising versions of proposals I've heard from the community tend to make everybody unhappy. So I think it would be helpful to hear multiple proposals presented to us, because I think that we may be better off making 80% of the community happy and upsetting 20%, rather than having 100% of the community upset that nobody got their way. And I would aim to at least consider what those other options are, instead of just looking for a compromise across the board. And again, that's just my request. That's not representative of this whole board, of course. Trustee George?
Yeah, and I think if we could work with the county commissioners and maybe bring in the other groups of people that want to come up here and recreate, and anglers, backcountry users that don't use OHVs, and I don't know. I know that on the Animas La Plata water shed, there's a representative from Trout Unlimited, and bring them in, see what their perspective is. I think that could be helpful. And yeah, I don't think, I know we're limited to the town, but this is a countywide issue, and we need to work with the county in order to make it all, as smooth as possible. I mean, there's a bunch of other users that are averse to OHVs, and you know, I don't know. I think expanding our working group to include some of the people in the county, even though it's not our purview, would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you. Administrator Edwards, how are you feeling about the discussion so far?
Well, I think this is a discussion that is pretty heady. There's a lot of things to discuss, but in the short term, I think, you know, it's kind of like eating the elephant. I know people don't like that, but we need to, from my perspective and talking to staff and listening to the community in the short time I've been here, and frankly, I sat on the first board that actually voted up or down, maybe the only board that ever voted up or down for this. So I am familiar with this issue. I would really recommend that we make a decision soon about putting together a group, and that may be a short-term group that can expand on a longer-term group, but we need to come back with, in the next 4 weeks, if not before, we need to come back with some ideas, even if there's just 2 or 3, so we can start beginning to address some of the issues. It's not so much that I think that looking at a more comprehensive view is not necessary. I do think it's necessary, but there's things that may be recommended that, you know, Trustee Harper mentioned earlier, signage. I don't want to get into what those solutions will be, but I do think that if we try to do too much right now, we may be in the middle of summer wondering what happened.
Thank you. Trustee Varela?
So which staff member are we going to put on this? I would like a consensus of that, because if we can determine which staff member it's going to be, that staff member can reach out to all the parties that has been suggested so far and start creating this task force. That's where we're at, because we've all agreed that this needs, gosh dang it, it says internet unstable again. Can everybody hear me, or am I stuttering?
We can hear you.
Okay, so if this is the direction that it's going, that sounds like the consensus that it is, what staff member are we going to be utilizing? Question mark. Anybody? Mr.
I'd
Seitz?
recommend Administrator Edwards. That'd be my request. Trustee Birma?
Well, just to add to that, I would also recommend Administrator Edwards, just based on his previous work with this in the past. But I do like the idea of putting together this group, and you know, I think I like the idea of coming back with 3 options and not necessarily framing it in this is the pro option, this is the con option, this is the middle of the road option, but just 3 different options that could be 3 different ways we could compromise even, or work around the solution, and not limit us to this is option from group A, option from group C, option from group B. But I think just having those options give us more space to work with. I know when we had discussions around Silverton Lakes, having those different options was very helpful during our discussions of that.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yeah, nice. Well said, Trustee Birma. That's kind of what I was thinking too, is really just recommending to this committee that there's a deliverable in the end to the trustees, and that's got to be something that's really usable for planning and being ready for the summer, and also giving really good information to businesses that are trying to plan. But also kind of within that framework, being able to be somewhat expansive and kind of, I don't know, I'd like to think imaginative, or a little bit of what if we did this and what if we did that? And then maybe, I'm not sure exactly what the framework would be, but I'm with Trustee Birma and just thinking about, is that, you know, is it a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 model? Is it, here's a set of ideas that sort of solves this issue, or here's a set of ideas that addresses this issue? I think there are a lot of different frameworks for setting that up, but in the end, I definitely think it's more useful to have kind of a structured presentation of a spectrum of ideas that the trustees get to work with and understand.
Thank you. I support the progress of my poorly stated idea into a much better stated idea. Trustee George?
Yeah, I think we just need to remember that, you know, this summer with COVID happening and the train not running, we still had one of the busier summers we've ever had. And so not pushing out the OHVs completely or, you know, even having a staging area, it may affect the tax revenue that we have gained this last year. So it's, you know, it's something that we need to think about, and whoever's on that board needs to take that seriously, or on that committee rather.
Trustee Harper?
Trustee George has brought up a great point. I've repeatedly asked for this, and I don't think we've ever received it. What is the actual tax revenue? And I know it jumped 5 years ago when we first opened up Silverton, parts of Silverton to OHVs. What does that look like? Do we have any sort of figures, any sort of data on that?
I have
because that is a great question.
I work for the ambulance, and our budget is based off of sales tax and sales revenue, and we haven't seen a drop, even with the train not running this summer due to COVID. We saw an increase in tax revenue. So I don't know if it was all OHVs or if it was.
Can we kick this one over to Administrator Edwards?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, my computer blacked out for a moment. I think Willie has kept records and comparative analysis. I would, you know, we can guess. I'd like to get those numbers and get them to you, and when there were changes, so we can have those adjusted. I would just suggest that would be a more fruitful conversation for us to have if we have those numbers and we can get that information with the nuances of how those were collected and when there were changes one way or the other. Trustee Harper and Mayor Furman.
Thank you.
Trustee Brella?
I don't know if this got answered because once again, I lost internet. September of 2014 was the trial month that OHVs were allowed to come into town for that month on a trial basis. And then the increase would be shown in 2015. Willie has brought us these numbers before. And that is another reason I want to disseminate what the tax revenue collection is, because the Wayfair versus whomever, which created the taxable income for cities, towns, states from internet sales, because that throws into a mix a different sort of taxation that was never collected either. This is why I asked Kelly for that information at the beginning of the meeting, because it does show everything, but we need to be able to actually look at the data. Sally was asking directly for data and data-driven statistics, and those would be them. We need that breakdown of all of this. I'm not sure. I know Willie has brought it to us in the quarterly town and county meetings when I first got on the board, but I have subsequently not seen it since then. So that is good information. Please, Anthony, moving forward, if you would like to ask those questions, it would be extremely helpful.
Thank you. Trustee Bierma?
I was just hoping to keep us from going down a rabbit hole. I think all those questions that everyone brought up are awesome questions for our task force or committee to ask and answer when they get together. So I guess if we could just figure out who's going to head that and what that's going to look like, we can put that together and they can get to work on answering all those hard questions and come back to us with some awesome options.
Thank you. I feel compelled to say one thing similar to our slippery slope of being off topic that Trustee Bierma is correcting us from doing, but I still feel compelled. I've talked about community first decision framework a few times and I wrote about it. I'm very concerned about this discussion being driven by maximizing sales tax revenue. The town needs to survive and we need to generate revenue. But if we're only looking at what generates the most revenue, I think we're walking down the very same path that all of the towns that we talk about not wanting to become have walked. And the way that we avoid that path is to choose community over tourism when they have a conflict. If we can do both, awesome. But if we have to pick one over the other, I strongly push this board to aim towards community. And that was my one side tangent. Mayor Pro Tem Barney and then Trustee George.
Okay, great. Yeah, I echo Trustee Bierma's nudge to get back on track with determining the process, because I think that this is a serious and significant task before our committee and before our community. And I wanted to just express support for Administrator Edwards to be our staff person, mainly because I think he's highly qualified and I think our staff has a tremendous workload. And there is a lot of different sort of data that can be collected. Tax revenue is definitely one of those data points. So to just hop down the rabbit hole a little bit further, I think this would be another moment to just indicate that is a data point. Enforcement, there are cost data points. There's quality of life data points. I don't want to be limited in our data collection. I think there's a lot of data to be collected. So when I referred to that, that's what I mean.
Thank you, Trustee George. I think you might be muted still.
Yeah, there's one last thing that I would like to point out, and that's the inequity between the people that live on the route and the people that don't. And I, for one, live on the route, and I've spoken to a lot of people that do live on the route, and people that voted for OHVs in town and lived on the route are now completely anti. Excuse me, sorry. I've got a pretty bad cold. And so we need to take that into account. And I for one, it's an absolute, it's an untenable situation for me where I live. And I know that, sales tax and them driving into town and spending money is a huge part of it, but that's something that we need to take into account. Thank you.
Thank you. So jumping back to logistics, it sounds like Administrator Edwards will be the chair of this task force. It sounded like Trustee Varela and Trustee George are both open to being trustee representatives. Heads of all of the different stakeholders that were mentioned before. I think it looked like Administrator Edwards, you were taking notes before. I just wanted to throw 3 other names out there. Louis Girodo, County Road and Bridge, Mike Maxfield, and Cliff Pinto. We mentioned before single track. So I know we're getting a pretty long list of people, so I trust, the 2 trustees and Administrator Edwards to figure out how to create the composition. But do we have board consensus on moving ahead with the task force with that staff and those trustee representatives, and giving them the ability to further craft that task force? Trustee Harper.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to reiterate and I guess ask the question. The purpose of this group is to collect information and provide information and to provide 3 courses, correct? But is this group willing to look for the balance of all? A couple years back, there was a campaign of all tracks matter. And it is true, all tracks matter. All these groups matter. Finding the balance in our life, in the backcountry, that's what we need to be doing. And is this group going to be doing that? Or is this an all or nothing proposition?
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yeah, I really see this group as being a solution-oriented group. It has to be a group that can work together and come up with collective ideas. And just to clarify, I would leave the sort of deliverable, the outcome structure, whether it's 3 models or whether it addresses a timeline or whether it takes a problem set and then outlines multiple solutions to it. I think there are a lot of different ways that could work. That seems like a really good idea for the administrator to kind of guide whatever that framework is that will be the most useful to the trustees.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That's I'm speaking for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe my suggestion for 3 options and providing the scope that I did was way too limiting. I think in general, my request is just not to get a singular proposal that we're either voting up or down or then trying to iterate on the fly, and just having a variety of suggestions is I think what I was meaning to ask for.
Well, thank you for saying that, because then that becomes less divisive and you actually have people working towards a collective.
Yeah. So I appreciate this discussion and the feedback, because I obviously hadn't fully baked that decision or that request, and I think we've ended in a much better place. Trustee Birma?
I'd just make a note too, and putting together this committee to make sure that we notify the public in a way that people who are interested being on this board can advocate for themselves to be on it.
Trustee Behrman, can you just expand? I want to make sure I understand what you're asking.
For example, like we brought up Eric Lawyer's name before, just as not being a representative of anything that apart from his own business. Just, his willingness to participate, and any other community members who might be in that same sort of situation, who aren't necessarily the head of EMS or the fire department or one of the town organizations.
So like a multiple citizen at large type of seats.
Yeah, that's a much better way to put it.
Trustee Harper, and then Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
I thank you. I was just asking, so true community input, truly open, truly transparent, truly everything. That's what I heard from Trustee Burma, correct?
I guess I'm a little confused by your question.
It was a statement.
Okay, I mean, I feel like
your statement was you want it to be all inclusive.
I want the option to be there if someone would like to participate, that they could.
Thank you.
Put their name in the ring for consideration of being a member at large.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
So just for Administrator Edwards' benefit and to be really clear with the community, is that something that we need to, for example, when the Kendall Committee was formed, we knew that we would have a representative from this board, from the county, from the Planning Commission, and then we had 4 spots for citizens at large. Is that something that we need to define here? Do we need to say like we will have, you know, it's important to us to have representatives from these major stakeholders that are sort of public service stakeholders. And then of course, Eric's representing kind of his business, but then I'm just a little bit unclear about, do we put a number on a citizen at large, or how would a citizen become a part of it? If we have 20 citizens that want to be on this task force, does that work? Or how do we structure that?
Trustee Barella?
Because I'm in agreement with Trustee Harper and Bierma that we want to have a lot of inclusivity and transparency.
So we can do it just like the 4th of July Association was formed. There was about 130 people that showed up to a meeting. By the time we got done, there was, 5 of us left. So when you let everybody have their say, then you actually bring in the community. You get to hear their feedback. I'm not saying that we're necessarily going to have that many people in the age of COVID due to the fact that we can't gather, but putting it out there, and it can't just be on social media. That's the major problem anymore. We have a lot of people that you've got to be able to walk up and tell them. I have been approached at the post office many, many times about this and who's going to head it and where's the discussion and how's it going to happen. So it's here, it's now. I think reaching out to those individual people that have already contacted me and or any of the rest of you is a good way to start. We need to be open, transparent. We need to make sure that if it's in the Zoom world, then it's in the Zoom world. If we're going to meet socially distanced at Kendall Mountain, then so be it. But we need to make sure that anybody who wants to be on there can be on there. So it doesn't need to be a blurb in the paper. It probably will. Hopefully they're listening tonight. And social media and any other form, I don't know, notifications hanging up in the liquor store and the grocery store and the gas station, wherever these points of contact that people walk by and see on a daily basis, in the post office, because we do want all public input. If they don't want to be on the board, give us what you think is the best solution. Write the committees an email, write us a letter. How do you think it would be best moving forward? Because of course you want everybody's input, because we all, just like Jim said, all tracks matter. We want to be all inclusive. We want to make sure that, hey, I'm sorry you live on the route. What can we do about that? So all of those need to be addressed.
Thank you. Administrator Edwards, any additional direction, clarification, scope concerns, anything that you'd like the board to discuss further tonight, or do you feel pretty good about the direction we're heading?
Well, I mean, it's the direction that you've set forth, Mayor Furman, the board, I should say. So sounds like that we will have an open Zoom until we know how many people there are, because there are limitations on how many people can go inside a building, and that we will allow the community to come.
Trustee Harper?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I really, and I kind of want to piggyback off of what Trustee Barella said. Mayor Chris Tukey, the way she opened up the discussion at Ken, obviously prior to COVID, opened up the discussion at COVID and really brought in, we had over 150 people in there, all walks of life, all types of opinions, and really got a true feeling, a true consensus. Obviously not 219 people, but to have that many folks show up in person was incredible. And what Mayor Tukey did was great. And I think we should try to emulate that with this discussion as well.
You're talking in relation to the 4th of July committee?
I'm talking about how she structured that conversation and bringing everyone in with regards to 4th of July, not the committee, but just 4th of July in general. I think this is a discussion that how she brought that all together is kind of the template that we should use for this. She did a great job.
Can you elaborate on specifically what she did?
She brought everybody together.
How?
Pro, con, like I said, all walks of life, all opinions, people that lived here, people that didn't, everybody showed up that had an opinion.
I mean, that sounds awesome, but what did she do differently than what we're talking about doing? Like, how can we do that? What are the, like, some specifics?
I'll go give her a call. I'll walk over to her house.
Great.
I can tell you what she did. She put together a newspaper advertisement, a Facebook advertisement, and she did exactly, she posted it everywhere I said she would. And she said, community meeting, how do we want to move forward? What are the solutions? And that's, I still have the paperwork in my office. Be more than happy to present it to Mr. Edwards later on.
Awesome. Trustee George?
As a representative of the San Juan County Public Health and EMS, it's going to be hard to get that many people in one place. It's
still going to have to be Zoom.
It's going to have to be a Zoom meeting. And sadly, a lot of the folks that will want to have input may not have the technological skills to, get online, but just saying.
Thank you. Trustee Bierma?
I was just gonna add, in the age of COVID, maybe the best route would be to have some sort of RSVP system in which, if you have interest, not only in just the issue, but actually being on as part of the board, you can notify Administrator Edwards or someone else in town, so we can have a rough list of numbers before we proceed forth with anything.
I don't think we've done this before, but is there a way we can do outreach to those who have let us know or let other people know that they have technological restrictions, to figure out a way to facilitate maybe like smaller group centers that can participate or something like, is there any way to try and be as inclusive as possible for people that just aren't going to be able to join Zoom on their own?
I think we need to remember that people can call in. That's one way. There are people who don't necessarily want to engage that way. We'll have to temper that. I don't think that having a meeting at Kindle or in a larger facility is out of the question. It's just we're not going to be able, if there's 180 people that want to engage in this, and that may be how many there are at the outset, we're not going to be able to do that in a facility.
Got it. Well, looks like you guys have a pretty big task ahead of you.
That we do.
Any other continued discussion on this topic, or questions or suggestions before we move on? Trustee Wiegert, anything you're thinking about?
No, I've been a part of quite a few of these in the past, and just excited to see how this one develops.
Thanks. Administrator Edwards, any last questions or clarifications?
No, I think we have our call. I'll touch base with Trustee Barella and Trustee George tomorrow, and I'll talk to Trustee Barella. I'll email you, Trustee George. You may want to get some rest, but we'll start setting a course.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for productive discussion so far. Moving on to approval of consent agenda items. I did have a comment in the minutes to the meeting where we voted on ski joring. Trustee Barella and Trustee myself voted no, and in the minutes it says that there were 6 yeses and 1 recuse. And I just wanted to have those minutes clarified. It's on page 116 of the packet.
Thank you. That was my concern as well.
Thank you. Any other notes with respect to payroll, accounts payable, or meeting minutes before we consider a motion to approve consent agenda? Would anyone like to make that motion?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the change noted by Shane.
I'll second.
Was that Trustee Harper that seconded?
Trustee George.
Trustee George. All right, thank you. So Trustee
Need a punch.
Barella made the motion. Trustee George seconded. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Barilla,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee Wager,
Yes.
trustee Birma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. I would like to note that Clerk Freeze was attending that meeting in her car, so I'm pretty impressed with the minutes being what they were, and I know that that was just a mini error. Staff reports. Administrator Edwards, would you like to highlight anything from the staff reports?
I don't think tonight, unless one of the staff would like to elaborate on whatever they have in their report that they would want to talk, or are there any questions from the trustees? I know it's getting a little long at this point. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I think most of the things that were noted for trustee consideration were also agenda items. So unless any trustees have specific questions, we can keep moving.
Actually, I don't have a question, but I
Please.
just wanted to, Todd noted this in his staff report, but the Kendall ski race series started on Friday and it was so well attended and really fun and exciting. And we'll have another one on Friday. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Todd Bove for making, and to Nathan Baxter as well for handling the reservations and the communication with me ahead of time on some logistics.
Thank you. Trustee Barella?
I'm glad you brought that up, Sally. Yeah, there is a big misconception going on, I guess, in the community. I guess even in my own mind. So these races are being sponsored by the town of Silverton. This is why we have never seen a special event permit come through and test our desks in order to approve or deny the special event permit for this to take place. So what's happening with these races, although it is very different than what you had originally stated when you proposed these races, Sally, is that everything is within the scope of what is already being run as COVID regulations for Kendall Mountain. Is that correct? Okay, so that is a big misconception going around town, that the children were only doing this. It was organized for the kids only, and we never saw any paperwork and or a COVID plan for this special event. So it is not a special event. It is an ongoing race series sponsored by the town of Silverton. Is that correct?
It's in collaboration with the ski team through school. So the teams are mixed. It's students competing on a team of 4 with community members who want to participate. It was approved. The COVID plan was submitted and approved through Todd and also public health. but it isn't necessarily an event outside of our normal, I don't know. I guess that's a little unclear to me. Maybe Lisa can help there, but it's really part of our race practice, but we can't travel to races this year. So we're just trying to have a few more this year than we normally do.
If I can
Lisa,
chime
are you-
in, I'm
Yeah,
here.
please.
Thank you, Trustee Barilla. Yeah, we typically organize a number of different things at Kendall that I think are considered just part of our normal programming over there, that are either in conjunction with the school or the ski team. And this kind of fell into that same category. It's not, in my mind, a special event in some of the ways that other outside entities are hosting special events. It's more part of normal Kendall operations since we work so closely with the school.
Thank you, everyone, for clarifying that. Hopefully going forward, there won't be that much, I guess, misinformation and or not being clear, because it took me a while to figure out what was happening there as well, not seeing a special event package across us and the COVID plan. So thank you all for clearing that up, and thank you for bringing it up, Sally.
All right. So moving on to committee reports. The master plan committee didn't have a meeting, but did present or have kind of an informal meet and greet via Zoom with the planning commission. Planner Adair prepared a pretty awesome, like 2-page summary recapping the education process of the master plan committee to date. And that was included in the planning commission packet, which I believe is public. So if anybody is curious about what the master plan committee has done so far, I recommend grabbing those planning commission meeting packets from this last meeting and reading through that, because it's a really good summary and recap. Trustee Barilla?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I had a library board meeting, which is my committee, one of my committees, and I would like to thank Director Kerwin for once again going out there and figuring out what the community needs and how to get it. She got some more grants from the Colorado Cares Act, which is part of the ongoing COVID money available. She's going to be looking for requests. She got about $1,000 that she could use for Audible books for those who have limited sight or limited time. I think that's quite an amazing thing. Anybody want to hit her up with a good list of books that they are interested in for Audible? She'll be willing to listen. I believe she got another $500 for added to the book collection. And she's still got all those computers for the kids. She's done an amazing job getting those, making sure that the internet is available on all of them, that they can sit in the library. We're going to go back to a little bit more normal hours starting in March. So the library will be open again until 5. And it's just a really great team that we have over there, and they do an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
I can go. I think Kendall Committee is on the agenda, but I lost my agenda. Is this an appropriate time to do that?
It's a committee.
Yeah, okay. So the Kendall Committee met last week, and we just reviewed and discussed the RFP, which was submitted to the attorney, and it all looked good. So based on the direction from the trustees at the meeting we had back in November, the RFP will be posted and out for the public. I think it's today through March 9th, and that will be available for public consumption and comment. And then the committee will meet again, prior to presenting that to the trustees, to just discuss what kind of input needs to be integrated into the RFP and how it needs to be revised based on the community input. And then it will be ready to present to the trustees. Hopefully on March 22nd is the date that I have for that. But I think that might depend on the scope and significance of the input that we receive in that 2-week period. So the meeting on March 9th, the committee is going to meet on March 9th at 6 o'clock. That'll be a posted meeting, and that will be a live Zoom time for the community to provide any feedback on the RFP that they would, if they'd rather prefer to participate in a meeting, or written submissions are welcome as well.
Thank you. Do one of you guys want to do a planning commission update? Trustee Wiegert?
I just wanted to go back to that Kendall Mountain RFP. I saw that was supposed to be posted today, and I've been looking for it on the town's website, and hadn't seen it posted as of this evening. Interim Administrator Edwards, do you know if it's on the website yet? And if so, where might we be able to tell people to go find it?
Sure. Trustee Weger, can you just give me a minute to see if I can look at my emails and find out, and then I'll get back with you as we keep going?
Sure, that'll be fine. Yeah, I can go on with the planning committee meeting unless Trustee Harper would like to summarize. Oh, well, we did have a zoning request for a change in zoning for a potential fourplex in the Scarborough addition, which is on the corner of 5th Street and Reese Street. And it's currently zoned R1. And after our discussion, master planning, or the planning committee, decided to recommend approval with conditions to the town board of trustees. So we would be looking to change that to a R2, which would then allow for this proposed fourplex as a multifamily residence. Seems like this is going to be for potential for workforce housing with 3 units, which is, as we know, much needed in the area. And I think we have a good recommendation to bring to the town board.
Thank you. And we did have a zoning board of adjustments meeting back on the 9th of February. And there were 3 items in front of the zoning board of adjustments. The first was an application to allow 4 tiny homes on 2 lots that the board voted no to. That would have been in contrast to the current zoning at the time, and would have allowed for a difficult time managing the maintenance of it continuing to be tiny homes versus RVs, because the definition of tiny home is vague, and it really comes back to an RV definition and zoning it as an RV park. There was another item where there was a request to allow a 4th marijuana license within the BP district, and the code currently limits it to 3. And the board voted no on that, to maintain the limit of 3 marijuana licenses in the BP district. And then there was a 3rd item where a 2nd residential structure was built on a lot where there was already a residential structure, and in order to meet the code from a a very specific reading, it would have needed a breezeway to be permitted. But the board voted to approve the variance because the addition of the breezeway would have actually been a negative impact to neighbors, to snow shedding, and to drainage on the property, and an extra expense just to meet a code provision where there already were two structures. And I'm sure there was a little bit more to that one, but that's the notes I have in front of me. Trustee Wiegert?
Thank you. I see from Lisa Branner that the draft RFP was posted as of 5:30, and I don't think I looked after 5, so that's why I missed it. But just as it should be, it should be pretty easy for people to find. It's where I was looking at it before it was out, so it is under community visiting for anybody who's interested, and then under the Kendall Mountain master plan. So excited to go through that RFP, and thank you, Lisa, for getting that up for us to look at.
Thank you. Any other committee reports? Yep, Administrator Edwards.
Yeah, Mayor Furman, thanks, Trustee Wiegert. I think I just want, the public can't see that right now. I just want to go ahead and tell them what that website is. It's townofsilverton.colorado.gov/ and then it's community-visioning for those of you who can't see the chat.
And if I may, I will be posting that information on Facebook tomorrow. I just didn't get to it this evening before this meeting, and it will be in the paper again this week as well.
Thank you. Trustee Harper?
Thank you, sir. May I have that link emailed to me? Or just emailed out to the...
I'll email it to you all in just a moment, Trustee Harper. I'd like to mention something else, Mayor Furman. I know that it's been brought to my attention to try to mitigate having stacked agendas. I've talked to staff, and we're going to do our best. There's a lot coming up, and I'll do my best, and we'll all do our best to try to string out what we need to get done so we're not here too late.
Thank you. We're getting close. I believe that's it for committee reports. Any additional trustee reports? Trustee Barella, and then Trustee Wiegert.
Okay, so this is another one of the community at large being misinformed and or not understanding. This has not been included in a public packet, and I'm not quite sure why. I did check with town attorney to make sure I am able to read this. So February 3rd, 2021, via email, Town of Silverton, Board of Trustees, 1360 Green Street, Silverton, Colorado. RE Town Attorney Resignment. Dear Mayor Furman and trustees, please let this notice serve as my 60-day notice resignation as town attorney. It has been a pleasure working with the Board of Trustees and town staff over the past several years. I humbly believe that the board and town staff continue to have the town's best interest at heart collectively. All can achieve a bright future for the town. In the next 60 days as town attorney, I will continue to assist the board as directed. Yours very truly, Paul Kosnick, his signature, and then Paul Kosnick, Eggleston Kosnick LLC, Paul Kosnick, attorney at law. I have been asked repeatedly why. There is no reason why, but that is the resignation letter for public records, so everybody knows why we are proceeding in the next discussions for a new town administrator as well as a town attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
And I'm just curious as what kind of progress we've made on beginning to hold these meetings in the Zoom office that we spoke of last week at our meeting.
Administrator Edwards or any other staff that is working on that have an update on the Zoom room?
My understanding, I don't know if Nathan's available right now, but my understanding is that the Zoom room should be available in the next couple of weeks. I can get an update from you in the next couple of days to make sure that's it. But I think we'll be able to meet again soon. Trustee Waiver.
Okay, thanks. Just waiting to see if Nathan had anything to add, but that's fine. I can't wait until we can get back together and start meeting in person.
Thank you. Nate.
So the last update I have is that our equipment is on back order until March the 15th. Once we receive that, we already have the ancillary hardware. We'll be testing it for the entire week before the last March meeting, and we're hoping to allow people back in-person meetings again.
Thank you.
Great. Thank
Trustee
you.
Bro. Sorry.
So just
Trustee
to
Burrell?
clarify, the Zoom room will be upstairs at Town Hall, where the normal trustee meetings take place. And the trustees will be meeting back in person. It will still be recorded live and broadcast via YouTube. And for those who cannot make it, for anybody who can't climb the stairs, anything like that, the chat and the raised hand would still be available for public comment through Zoom, and you can still watch it, and it's being recorded. Is that the correct consensus, that everybody understands why we're moving forward with this?
Lisa Branner.
If I may just add one point of clarification, we still have restrictions on square footage, and the meeting room in Town Hall, I believe, can accommodate 10 people. So we could have the trustees and a few staff members there. The public would still be participating virtually. But the idea is to be able to get the trustees all in one room so that you all can have the face-to-face interaction. And then as we are able to accommodate more people in the space, we can look at allowing the audience to join. But right now, I believe that current COVID restrictions do still limit us in terms of the number of people that we can have in the room in person.
Thank you. Trustee Burrell, is that sufficient clarification?
It's not only clarification for me, it's clarification for the public at large, so they understand how this is going to work going forward.
Great, thank you. Any other trustee reports or discussion? All right, moving on to continued business, attorney search process. Clerk Freeze did share with the trustees the documents on file with the town relating to the prior search. And just to volunteer my input, there's 2 files that have a 2018 date relating to the town's search for an attorney. Both of those I thought looked great. I don't know any reason today why we would need to revise the scope of what we're looking for or the qualifications. And my recommendation would be to simply take those 2 letters, change the dates and the contact information to be whoever the appropriate person is on staff, and to put those out through all available channels. Any other thoughts or discussion? Trustee Barella?
You can correct me if I'm wrong, Jess. I do believe last time we did the search, we were talking about background checks and really good vetting. for both the town administrator and the town attorney. Just doing a regular background check was something that I don't think was done in previous years. And do you remember if we did it last time, Jess, or not? When you don't remember? I'm not sure either. So, but I think that that's something, known associates vetting, all that kind of stuff is really good for us to know in the process when the applications come in.
Thank you. I think that's a great suggestion as well. Perhaps in terms of process, I guess my recommendation would be, as opposed to just changing the dates and sending them out since they weren't included in the packet or anything, and I imagine we'd need to vote on them, to change the dates, change the contact info, put them in our next meeting packet so that we can review and approve those if they meet everybody's expectations.
Agreed.
I'd like to see it.
Great. Yep. Okay. Administrator Edwards, is that sufficiently clear, or is there anything else you'd like to ask about that process?
No, I think we need to change the dates and get it out.
Yeah, I'd say there's 3 files that have a 2018 date. One of them is for Brighton, and the other 2 are for Silverton. So it'd be the 2 most recent Silverton files with the 2018 dates in the attorney search files folder.
And I heard Trustee Barella said that we want to do background checks. Do you want us to do those before? Do we want to vet people before, or do we want to do those at the end, Trustee Barella?
I think our discussion was to receive all of the applications first, go through, we narrowed it down to the ones that we were interested, and then we were going to vet them all. I think we did vet them all. If somebody could remind me, I'm not sure. We did a full background checks on everybody, because I remember there was one issue on one person. I'm like, obviously we can't violate that trust, but we were glad that we had the background check done. So after we narrow it down, after we receive the applications.
Okay, thanks. I missed it for just a second, Trustee Barella earlier. Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd also note that both letters include some other terms and conditions at the very end. And we probably want to add that we plan to do background checks to those terms and conditions. All right, any other attorney search process discussion? Great. Administrator search process discussion. I thought a lot about this since the last meeting, and I thought a lot about Trustee Wiegert's comment about budget. And I also received feedback from Patrick Rondinelli with DOLA that all of the consultants and consulting firms that he recommended require an RFP in order to submit a proposal. And preparing that RFP based on what files we have available isn't a very time-consuming process, but it sounded like we all would want to get together to look at the town code description of the role, the employee handbook description of the role, and talk about the qualities that are most important to us. So it seems like it is a process to put together that RFP to some extent, and that once we put that out, there's a couple of weeks that we would need to allow for the proposals to come back. So the idea that I have, taking into account Trustee Wiegert's suggestion to be budget-minded, and also Trustee Barella's suggestion that we have a lot of resources and time spent into the documents that we have so far, is to conduct, my suggestion to the board tonight would be to conduct kind of like a grassroots locally managed search first while we continue to go down the process of preparing an RFP and requesting proposals from consulting firms. If while we're doing that, we receive a high quality of candidate submissions, then we don't need to go down the path of hiring the consultant and spending the money. And if we don't, we haven't wasted any time in getting those proposals, which it sounds like are anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks out anyway. So I'm curious to hear the board's thoughts on that. So kind of splitting the difference, keeping our options open for the consulting process, but also seeing what we could do on our own in the meantime. Trustee Birma?
I would say it seems like a really reasonable and logical approach to it, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, we have good resources, we can use them now, and then if things don't pan out, we're not behind.
Trustee Barella?
I'm not sure that this is enough time based on the time that it is. As Anthony said, being conscious of this, it is 10:13. I do believe last time we wanted to go into this full discussion of how we're going to do this, what we're going to change, reading everything. We did it in work sessions. I just feel that there's too much content for a quick little consensus right now. I don't know how you guys were given a ton of documents, previous contracts, how contracts look. You were given the scope of what you were supposed to be looking at. I'm obviously a little bit more well-versed, having pulled those paperwork out and read them prior to the board getting them. I just feel that this should be a work session where we can really sit there, talk about it, get it hashed out, bring those documents in front of us like we've done before, go through them. What verbiage do we need to change? Are we expecting too much in one category, not another? I think I made this pretty clear at our last work session or quick meeting, whatever we want to call it, last Monday, because there's so much to go through here. I don't feel that a 15-minute discussion of this is appropriate, and it's already 10:15. How much longer are we going to hold this meeting till midnight if we want to really hash this out?
Thank you, Trustee Barella. For clarification, I wasn't suggesting that we hash out the scope of the role tonight, just the process. And I completely agree that we should have a work session to develop the scope of the role. But I do think time is of the essence, and having a vision of the process and whether or not this board is open to pursuing both paths simultaneously, or wants to just pursue kind of the grassroots self-contained process or the consulting process is an important kind of gating decision that'll change the direction we go. From Patrick Rondinelli's presentation last week, the consulting process, they would actually help us develop the scope of the role. And that's something that would happen further down the road. If we decide to do it ourselves, then that work session becomes a little more urgent for us to develop the scope of the role ourselves. And so that's why I spent the time reading all those documents and thinking about what we could do to best set up the town to succeed in a short period of time with limited budget. Mayor Pro Tem Barney. Mayor Pro Tem Barney, I think you're frozen, if you can hear us.
Wait, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. I don't know if that changes. I see a lot.
I think we lost you, Mayor Pro Tem Barney, if you can hear us. While we're waiting for Mayor Pro Tem Barney's internet to fix, any other comments, questions, suggestions? Trustee Wiegert?
In the past, in our nationwide RFP dispersion, at the best, we've only received 5 applications. And and from that, I think we had 3 that we maybe potentially thought could had the opportunity for success here in Silverton. So I think a local search, we may get 1 or 2 candidates. I'd be surprised if we really get any more than that. But if that's the direction that this board wants to take, we can give it a shot. I am looking at our most recent RFP, and I see under the scope of services, we have 11 different titles of scope of services for the town administrator. And I think that's a good starting place for us. I think a lot of those things are things that we're going to want to carry forward, but I think we also may want to discuss that and possibly add something or make some changes.
Thank you. And I may have misspoken when I said like kind of the grassroots search. I didn't necessarily mean to restrict our geographic region for marketing. I meant to do it ourselves, kind of give Lisa as communications, community relations manager, the freedom to market this before engaging a consulting firm that has significantly more resources and costs us quite a bit more money. And totally agree, Trustee Wiegert, about the RFP and those categories and descriptors. Mayor Pro Tem Barney, looks like you're back. Did you want to finish your comment or question before?
Sure, it might be a little out of place or awkward not knowing what came before it, but I was just going to say I can see a value in working with a consultant or a firm who can support us with some of the logistics and just increasing potentially our field of candidates. But I really would, I would really like to see what we can get without that expense ahead of that RFP process. So I would support working towards kind of the in-house approach in the next few weeks to get that kick-started. And then, but I also do think that there's value in simultaneously moving towards potentially, if we needed to engage the consultant, being prepared to do so.
Thank you. Should we consider a work session before our March 8th meeting on the same date? It's like a 5 o'clock work session on March 8th before our 7 o'clock meeting.
Can I request at least 5:30, if not 6? That's very tight.
Sure. Thank you.
Sorry, that was 5:30 on, or what did we decide? 5:30 or 6?
6 o'clock.
6 p.m., right?
Okay, 6 o'clock on the 8th. Thank you.
Can I just get clarification for everyone that work session is going to be to discuss the process or the scope?
I mean, it sounds like we're going to have to talk about both. I'm hoping that tonight we can agree to pursue the dual process of an in-house search that launches sooner, simultaneous with kind of preparing an RFP to go out to consulting firms, which will take some time to get back to us, so that we can see if maybe it's possible for us to receive a candidate pool that's decent before incurring any cost associated with engaging a consultant. So if we have that direction tonight, then we can start, the town can start working on preparing the materials for us to review and add to on the 8th, so that hopefully on the evening of the 8th, we could even have the work session, and then approve the materials later in the meeting, and be able to simultaneously launch an in-house search and send out RFPs to consulting firms with sufficient time to get back to us later. Trustee Barella?
So this is what happened last time when we were talking about in-house search. What are we saying? What media are we going to be pushing it on? Where is it going to be advertised? Are we just going to have friends advertise it? This is why I said it kind of needs to go to a work session, because there's nothing wrong with us doing a nationwide scoping, putting it out there into every single place we had. Same way with the attorney, we made sure, I can't even remember, I have to pull up all my notes on how many places we had it advertised that we were looking for a new municipal attorney. So when you're saying in-house or grassroots, you're only talking about what? That I think our terminology is creating a little bit of confusion, because I know it is with me. So we're going to say that the Board of Trustees is going to put out an RFP based on the information that we used in 2018, hash out some new details, and create a different scope of services. Or utilize the same one we have. I mean, that's kind of why I said this should probably just go to a work session, because everything we're talking about is good and valid points. But do we want to sit here and continue to do this? Do we want to write down notes and bring them all with us to the next one to say, this is what I feel is more important, and going forward, and these are the locations it should be broadcast to, and and put out? That's kind of what I was talking about before. That's my point.
For sure. Those are all great points. I think my suggestion is to direct staff, and specifically, depending on Lisa's bandwidth, to create a plan for distribution. I don't know if she was our community relations manager back when we did the last series of searches, but my understanding is that she's pretty expert at this. And so that could be part of our March 8th workshop, as well as her presenting a plan for distribution, and the board's scope could be coming up with any modifications to the RFP description and role description that we want on March 8th. Am I using the right date? Yeah, March 8th. So I'm just trying to tee us up to have as much success on March 8th as possible. I'm not trying to have us go into the details of what the role is or even the scope of the search, just a plan for how we can prepare for March 8th so that we can try and knock it all out on that one day. Okay.
Everybody froze, so I'm assuming you clarified what I was clarifying.
Yeah, sorry, Trustee Barella. I was saying I'm not trying
it's my internet.
Yeah, I'm not trying to dig into the details tonight. I'm just trying to set us up to have sufficient scope for March 8th and preparation for March 8th, so that we can hopefully have everything we need done then to launch whatever we vote on that night. Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
I think that seems like a good course of action. Is there anything else we need to discuss at this point?
Is it only if Administrator Edwards has any questions or any other trustees want to clarify or suggest a different direction? Okay. Any final thoughts before public comment? All right. At this time, we will reopen public comment for this meeting. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. If you...
Mayor, you do have Trustee Harper.
Oh, sorry. Trustee Harper, please go ahead.
I was just going to ask if Tyler's okay.
Oh,
George, is he okay?
He is. He's he's listening right now, and
No, I know he's not feeling well. I just want to make sure he's okay.
oh, okay.
Okay. So if anyone would like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. And we have Melody Skinner. Melody, you are now a panelist and you've got 3 minutes.
I think the OHV group you're putting together is going to be great, especially if it's a long-term thing. But I don't know if the town ever bought signs for the streets. So if they didn't, you're going to have to come up with a soon solution for that because we're not that far from May. Thank you.
Thank you, Melody. Any other public comments? Oh, and we've got Tyler jumping back in for a second.
Yeah, sorry guys, I had technical difficulties. I don't know what's going on, but I'm here.
I just wanted to make sure you were under the weather, sir. And just make sure you're okay.
Yeah, thanks for sticking it out with us. And I do not see any other public comments at this time. So this meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees is now adjourned at 10:28 p.m. Thank you all. See you on March 8th at 6 p.m.